Nathaniel, carrying the boys, glanced back and met Arya's gaze. Without needing words, she nodded and quickly moved to join him. "Let's all freshen up and meet in the dining room," Nathaniel announced. "We'll take care of showing everyone to their lounges, boss," Andrew offered. "Appreciate it," Nathaniel replied, continuing forward with Arya by his side, while Alex, Anna, Ethan, and Isla followed closely behind. "Will, Adam, Charles, Aidan, Ash, Stephen, come over here," Andrew called as Justin, Dr. Williams, Dr. Sterling, Dr. Yen, Dr. Rowan, Anita, and the others gathered around. Andrew unfolded a map of Everleigh Ranch and explained the assignments. "We'll take Dr. Yen, Nurse Paul, and Nurse Esther to the cottages out back. Charles, you're in charge of Dr. Sterling. Take Dr. Rowan and Dr. Williams with you. All medical personnel will be in close proximity, just in separate cottages," he explained. "You heard the man. Please follow me," Charles instructed, as Rowan, Williams, and Claire fell in step behind him. Will glanced at Dr. Yen, Nurse Paul, and Nurse Esther before gesturing for them to follow. "If you'll come with me," he said. Andrew continued assigning accommodations until only he and Anita remained. He turned to her with a playful smirk and said, "Shall we, future Mrs. McLeod?" Anita stepped closer, leaning into his side. Andrew wrapped an arm around her, pressing a kiss to her hair as they followed the others. "Do you think we could visit your uncle and aunt first thing in the morning?" Andrew asked, glancing down at her. "I'd love that, very much," Anita replied with a happy smile. Andrew nodded. "I hope they like me," he said softly, his voice low and gruff. "Oh, they'd better. It's too late to back out now," she teased. Andrew threw his head back, laughing, but his mind lingered on the thought. He sincerely hoped Anita's uncle, the only living relative she had mentioned, would accept him. Anita was such a beautiful soul, and he couldn't bear the idea of anything dampening her spirit as they prepared for their wedding. Having her family's blessing would mean everything to him. Anita let out a contented sigh, a wave of nostalgia settling over her. Memories of living in Sylvan Ridge flooded her mind as she reflected on how much her life, and Arya's, had changed since they left. She remembered following Arya to New York, determined to support her friend as best she could. It had been an incredibly challenging time for Arya, losing her father and facing motherhood, only to discover that the father of her children was battling cancer. Anita had known she couldn't let Arya face all of that alone. Even with her aunt's support, the elderly woman could only do so much. Anita never imagined that by deciding to accompany Arya to New York, she would find the love of her life, a wonderful man who had changed her world completely. She burrowed into Andrew's arms, nestling her face against his broad chest. "I love you, baby," she murmured softly, her voice filled with emotion. Andrew chuckled, his deep baritone warm and inviting as he looked down at her. "What did I do to deserve that declaration just now, my darling?" he asked teasingly. "For just being you," Anita replied in a somber tone. Andrew stopped walking, gently tilting her face upwards so he could meet her eyes. Though the outdoor lighting cast shadows over her features, he could still see the beauty in her expression. Lowering his head, he cupped her face and placed a tender kiss on her lips. Then he pulled back slightly, his eyes searching hers before leaning in again for another kiss. Anita's face brightened with a smile, her lips stretching into a playful grin. On the third kiss, however, Andrew deepened it, his mouth claiming hers with a searing intensity that cut off her laughter and drew a sharp intake of breath. Anita moaned softly into his mouth, her body melting into his as if she'd lost all strength in her legs. She leaned fully against him, surrendering to the moment. Meanwhile, a few yards away, Dr. Yen felt a bit awkward about how formal Will was being with her. There was a strange sense of loss, as if he was slipping away from her. It was an odd feeling. Why she felt as though she was losing someone she didn't even have was beyond her. What she'd shared with Will had been nothing more than an accidental one-night stand. She couldn't possibly be developing emotional ties to him so soon. Could she? But then again, the sex had been good. No, scratch that. The sex was very, very, very good. Damn it. She glanced at him sideways, her eyes involuntarily sweeping down his body in a hungry, lingering gaze. The thought of getting cozy with him in this wintry paradise planted itself in her mind and began to take root. When Will turned and caught her staring, her breath hitched and she stumbled, nearly falling. Without hesitation, Will reached for her, steadying her before she could trip. "Are you okay?" he asked, concern etched across his face. "Are you okay, Dr. Yen?" Paul and Esther echoed from behind them. "Thank you, I'm fine," Yen said with an awkward smile. "Clumsy me," she added, trying to brush it off with humor. "It's not your fault," Esther said kindly. "Not all of us are used to walking in this much snow. But it is beautiful, isn't it?" "That, folks, is how you spot city folks in the crowd," Paul joked, earning a playful swat from Esther. Yen chuckled, and Will smiled indulgently at the exchange. "Oh my," Esther exclaimed, as they approached a lane lined with 3 cottages nestled amidst the snow-dusted greenery. The scene was enchanting, the landscape almost magical. "Nurse Paul, this is your stop," Will said, handing over a key card. Paul's face broke into a wide grin. "Go on, test it out." "Let me see if you've got this," Will said, motioning for the man to try the door. The man hurried forward with his backpack and carryall. Upon reaching the door, he swiped the card against the panel. The device fizzled, producing a clicking sound. He turned the knob and the door opened. Will gave him a thumbs up. "Freshen up and be back at the house in 10 minutes, he said. "Yeah, all right, thank you," the man replied before hurrying inside. After walking a bit further, Will pointed to the next cottage. "That's your stop, Miss Esther," he said, pulling out another keycard. "Thank you, Will," Esther replied. Turning to Dr. Yen, she added, "See you around, neighbor," making Yen chuckle as she waved. Will paused for a moment, watching as Esther entered her cottage before continuing down the lane with Yen. A tense silence settled between them as they walked, the crisp winter air amplifying the quiet. Yen's heart began to race as she saw another cottage up ahead. She realized this might be her last chance to clear the air. "And this is your stop, Dr. Yen," Will said, holding out a key card to her, his gaze meeting and holding hers. "My first name is Kim. My full name is Kim Yen," she said with a small smile, looking up into his handsome face but making no move to take the key card. "I'm Vietnamese American. 4th generation, I think." I know you're Vietnamese American," Will said, his voice steady. "You look like Huyen Thi Tan Tui, Miss Vietnam 2022. I think she was from Da Nang." He gave her a searching look. Yen felt unexpectedly flattered by the comparison. She didn't follow beauty pageants, but she figured the woman he mentioned must be stunning and accomplished to hold such a title. She decided the first thing she'd do when she got inside was look her up. "Sorry, I'm just a girl from Queens," she quipped. Will chuckled, his eyes narrowing slightly, giving them a hooded look in the dim outdoor light. "All right, Kim from Queens," he said, holding the key card out for her again, his gaze never wavering from hers. "Thank you," she said as she took the key card, trying to ignore the electric jolt that shot through her at the brief brush of their hands. She gave him a quick nod before turning towards the door. A voice in her head screamed at her to respond to the question he had asked on the plane, and her heart raced as she fumbled with the key card. She could feel his presence behind her, waiting and watching for her to go inside. When the door clicked open, she turned the knob and paused, glancing back at him. Will gave her a brief nod of acknowledgement before turning to leave. "Do you like her?" The words escaped her lips before she could stop herself. Her heart slammed against her chest as he stopped and slowly turned, giving her his full attention. "The flight attendant," she blurted, her voice trembling. "I saw her give you her number." Heat surged through her as she wished the ground would open up and swallow her whole. She couldn't believe she had said it out loud. But she had, and he'd heard her. Worse, he was now walking back toward her, stopping only when there was barely an inch of space between their bodies. Dr. Yen tilted her head up, her breath hitching as she met his intense gaze, her bewilderment mirrored in his. "That's the wrong question, Kim," Will said, his voice low and husky. Yen thought she loved the way he said her name. She swallowed hard, her pulse racing. "I think the real question is," he continued, his tone gruff, "why do you care?" Dr. Yen's breathing grew fast and shallow, though he hadn't even touched her yet. Meanwhile, back at the main house, Nathaniel directed Ethan and Alex to the wing they would share with their partners before heading upstairs and down the hallway to the family suite. As he passed one of the rooms, Arya heard her aunt's voice along with Noria's. The twins must have heard too, because they wriggled out of their father's arms, calling out, Big Mama! Nathaniel stepped ahead to help them open the door to an expansive room with 3 baby cots strategically placed within the space. The bedroom was a masterpiece of rustic luxury. The walls and vaulted ceiling were crafted from rich, weathered timber, with massive beams crisscrossing overhead, anchoring the space with a rugged, timeless strength. At the center of the room hung a wrought iron chandelier, its soft light spilling like liquid gold across the room. At the foot of each baby cot sat a small treasure chest, and beside each cot, a fur rug sprawled across the polished wooden floor, its plush softness contrasting with the sturdy beams and planks surrounding it. Floor-to-ceiling windows lined one wall, offering breathtaking views of endless pines and distant mountain peaks. Between the windows sat 2 cream armchairs paired with a low table, forming a cozy nook perfect for quiet mornings spent gazing into the wilderness. A woven tapestry adorned the far wall, its intricate patterns adding a splash of color against the room's earthy tones. Soft lamps illuminated the corners, casting warm halos of light that softened the edges of the night. Every detail, every texture had been carefully chosen, creating a space that felt both opulent and homely. Arya shared a smile with Nathaniel, giving him an adoring look before heading to join her aunt and Noria. "Thank you, Auntie," Arya said, wrapping her arms around the older woman's neck. "Thank you, Miss Everly. I don't know what we would have done without you," Nathaniel added. Her aunt waved off the comment with a warm smile. "I should be thanking you. You've done a great job keeping a smile on my niece's face, and for that, I'm satisfied," she said, patting the hand Arya had wrapped around her. Nathaniel grinned in response. Noting Noria standing by, Arya said, "Thank you, Noria," with a kind smile. "Thank you, Noria," Nathaniel echoed. "You're welcome, Dr. Hawthorne." "And you too, sir," Noria replied with a smile. "Thank you, Aunt Noria," Owen chimed in, followed by Liam, which made everyone chuckle. "You're welcome," Noria said fondly, beaming at the two. Much later, with the twins distracted by the little ones, Nathaniel guided Arya out of the children's room and into theirs. Arya immediately noticed their room shared the same aesthetic as the children's, but with some striking differences. At the center of the room stood a sprawling bed framed in dark wood and draped in plush white linens, regal and inviting. Layers of pillows in earthy tones were meticulously arranged, adding texture and complementing the room's warmth. To the side, an open-floor bathroom was enclosed by a transparent glass wall, showcasing a jacuzzi tub and a shower stall, complete with a sauna-like enclosure. Arya chuckled at the sight. "I suppose privacy wasn't much of a consideration when that corner was designed," she teased. Nathaniel wrapped his arms around her shoulders and leaned close to her ear. "Privacy, you say?" he murmured, his voice low and teasing. Arya closed her eyes as a thrill shot through her, his warm breath on the shell of her ear making her breath hitch. "Nah," he said in a whispered growl. "There's no privacy in here, my love. In fact, it's soundproofed, so no one will hear you when you scream my name." Arya let out a shaky breath as her heart raced. Nathaniel made her crane her neck as he captured her lips in a passionate kiss, pulling her even closer into his loving embrace. Meanwhile, back at Jake and Dr. Hart's cottage, Evangeline held Jake's gaze, processing his firm response. She nodded and took a deep, calming breath, which drew a gentle smile from him. Jake continued stroking her face with his thumbs, his brilliant blue eyes locked on hers, piercing and reassuring. But then, a wave of profound fear surged through Evangeline at the thought of Luke finding them and potentially harming anyone in the group. "What if he manages to come here? What if—" she began in a fervent whisper. "He wouldn't even get close. Trust me, please," Jake assured her. Then, as a thought struck him, he added, "Would you mind if we changed your phone's SIM card?" Evangeline's eyes narrowed in a searching gaze. Sensing her hesitation, Jake elaborated. "I wouldn't want him calling you, or worse, using someone as leverage to lure you to him. Like your parents, for instance." His voice dropped to a low, raspy tone. "I never discussed my parents with him," Evangeline responded quickly, a fresh wave of fear engulfing her at the mention of them. Her eyes widened as she asked, "Do you think he might have found them?" "Hey, don't worry about your parents. They're fine. It's you I'm worried about," Jake replied, his tone calm but firm. So can we change the SIM? After a moment, Evangeline nodded slowly. Once we change it, you can call your parents using the new number. It'll be a secure line, Jake assured her, and she let out a small sigh of relief. I have your phone with me. Let's go, he said, taking her hand. Jake led Evangeline down the stairs. As they stepped out of the cottage, the icy breeze of the snowy plain enveloped them. Jake took a deep breath, exhaling slowly as he absorbed the tranquil beauty of the scene, letting it settle within him. It's beautiful, isn't it? And there's something about the fresh air. It just feels different, Evangeline said, snuggling closer to Jake's side. Jake placed a soft kiss on the top of her head, responding with a quiet hum of agreement. When Evangeline tilted her head to meet his gaze, he leaned in and kissed her lips gently. Everything feels better when you're with me, Jake said, a teasing smile playing on his lips. Evangeline giggled. You're such a charmer, she replied, giving him a playful nudge. Jake chuckled, his laughter blending with the crisp, peaceful atmosphere. A couple yards away, Will continued backing Dr. Yen into the cottage. Once inside, he used his booted foot to kick the door shut, plunging them into semi-darkness. The only light came from a dim, dangling chandelier at the center of the ceiling. Its golden glow illuminated the room and cast shadows over the two of them. I'm waiting for an answer, Kim, Will rasped, his voice low and husky. I just thought, as a friend, I could, ask? She stammered, her words disjointed and almost nonsensical, as if she was saying anything to save face. Is that so? Will replied, his tone carrying an intimacy that made the atmosphere charged, leaving Dr. Yen struggling to take steady breaths. So you wouldn't mind if I honored the date she's trying to initiate, he pressed. Yen shrugged and lowered her gaze. That's your prerogative, she said. Then angrily she added, You know what? I'm sorry, I shouldn't have gotten involved. Please, by all means, go after whoever you want. Why should I care, right? Yes, we slept together one night. Her voice rose as she built momentum, but Will cut her off. Correction, he rasped with a finger raised. She paused and looked up at him, meeting his intense gaze. Not once, he clarified. We did it all night. And the morning. Yen felt heat rise to her cheeks and the back of her neck. That certainly explained why she'd woken up sore and could hardly walk the next day. She hated that he brought it up. That's not a gentlemanly thing to say, Will, she said, her tone sharp with offense. Come now, Kim. Nothing about what we did that night was gentle or demure, so don't try to play coy now, he quipped. Yen pushed against his broad chest, irritated when he didn't budge. She huffed in frustration. Even though she couldn't see his face clearly in the dim light, she could tell he was amused, and that only annoyed her more. I think I'd like you to leave now, she said tersely. Thanks for showing me my lounge, but as you said, we only have a few minutes to get back to the others, so I'd like to get on with it. All right, Dr. Yen, he rasped, but he didn't move. After a tense minute, she glanced up at him again. If you want me, Kim, then say so, Will said. Because I want a repeat of our wild night together, but if you don't, make that clear too, so I don't cross a line you don't want me to. All right, baby? Yen was completely disarmed by his words. Claire's advice about not letting Will go echoed in her mind. She never thought she would hear such a confession from any man, so when he finally turned to leave, her hand shot out to grab his wrist and stop him, her subconscious taking over. When he looked down at her, his gaze unreadable, he reached for her jaw. Yen leaned up instinctively, meeting his lips as they descended on hers. Back at the log house, Nathaniel cradled Arya in his arms, their bodies trembling from the overwhelming aftermath of their shared passion. Neither could bring themselves to let go, both clinging to each other as if the world might fall away. Nathaniel's grip around Arya's shoulders tightened, his chest pressed against her back, his face resting against the side of hers as he drew in uneven, shallow breaths. What have you done to me, Ariana? Nathaniel murmured, his voice thick with emotion, raw and unsteady. The intensity of what he felt for her left him reeling, a torrent of unrestrained passion that had consumed him completely. Now, as the peak faded and reality crept back in, he felt hollow and unanchored, desperate to hold on to her, the only tether to the overwhelming, addictive emotions she had awakened in him. I love you, Arya whispered, her voice soft and laden with emotion. Her eyes remained closed, her lips slightly parted as she fought to ground herself once more. Trying to pull free from the lingering haze of ecstasy Nathaniel had so effortlessly drawn her into, and burrowing deeper into his arms, not wanting to not have her skin pressed to his. They both heard the turning of the doorknob, followed by a knock, and then Owen's tentative voice calling, "Mom? Dad?" His young voice was muffled by the sturdy door. "It's time for dinner," Liam announced. "No," Nathaniel muttered as Arya began to pull away from his arms. She turned to meet his gaze and, as their eyes locked, he repeated, "No," pressing his forehead to hers. Arya reached up with her free hand, gently touching his face before shutting her eyes, surrendering to his need to hold her close. "Boys," they heard Noria call. "Come on, come with me. Give Mom and Dad a minute to join us." The boys responded, their words indistinct, but Arya felt a wave of relief that someone else had stepped in to manage them. Her heart swelled with emotion at Nathaniel's vulnerability, and she held onto him tightly, savoring his embrace as his lips trailed soft kisses down the bridge of her nose, finally pausing over her mouth. "Have I told you that you take my breath away, my love?" Nathaniel rasped, his voice low and rough with feeling. "You tell me every day," Arya whispered, her lips trembling with a smile. "And I love it every time you do," she added softly. "I love being reminded that you are mine, Nathaniel Hawthorne," Arya whispered, "just as I am yours." A smile spread across his face. "Talks like that are what's going to keep getting you pregnant every single year, Mrs. Hawthorne," he quipped. "Oh, yeah," Arya murmured, kissing him slowly and teasing his lips with gentle nibbles. She shifted slightly in his arms, trying to turn and face him fully, her hands reaching to frame his face. But Nathaniel stopped her, holding an open palm against her stomach as he drew her back into the nook of his arms. He took over the kiss, deepening it, holding her so delicately that she was instantly raked with rippling pleasure. Downstairs, the family had gathered, with Liam and Owen seated alongside their Aunt Noria and Big Mama. When Andrew entered with Anita, his gaze went straight to Nathaniel's chair and Dr. Hawthorne's. Seeing both seats empty, he exchanged a look with Ethan. The younger man shrugged and glanced over his shoulder toward the grand staircase, as though expecting Nathaniel and Ariana to come down at any moment. "Excuse me for a moment, baby," Andrew murmured to Anita, brushing a kiss against the corner of her lips before stepping away and heading towards the stairs. Noria noticed him and called out, "Andrew?" He stopped and turned in her direction. She gave him a small smile and a slight shake of her head, quietly signaling him not to go upstairs. Andrew nodded, smiled back, and changed course. Aidan, who had caught the exchange, walked over to Noria and leaned in close. "What was that Secret Service level communication just now?" he teased in a low voice. Noria chuckled, tilting her head back to meet his gaze. Her eyes sparkled as they locked with his playful expression. "Nothing," she said with a mischievous smile. "Oh, that's how it is," he replied, feigning offense and making her laugh softly. Meanwhile, as Andrew retraced his steps back to Anita, who was now sitting with Miss Everly and the twins, he took out his phone to send a message to Nathaniel to make sure he was all right. He understood Noria's deduction that the two might not want to be disturbed, but he remembered a previous incident when Nathaniel was very sick. Dr. Hawthorne had mistakenly assumed Nathaniel was with Julia Davies, only to later discover that Nathaniel was on the brink of death. Andrew decided it wouldn't hurt to double-check. Upstairs, Nathaniel still cuddled in bed with Arya, reached for his phone when it chimed. Knowing it would be Andrew, he quickly typed a message. "Just need a minute with my wife." Then he placed the phone back on the nightstand and resumed holding Arya close. "You know Andrew is going to give us a few minutes and then come knocking," Arya quipped, making Nathaniel chuckle. He was amused that she had figured out Andrew's tendency to be paranoid whenever Nathaniel was not within his sight. "He's like a papa bear," Arya teased. "I tell you, he's worse than Tom." Nathaniel shook with laughter. He thought Arya would perhaps understand better if she had been there from the beginning when his father had literally tied his life to Andrew's. Nathaniel also figured that Andrew probably felt guilty, believing that if his focus hadn't been entirely on Nathaniel's parents would still be alive. A few minutes later, the two joined the family just as the kitchen staff brought out dish after dish to fill the dining table. "Dad, Mom!" the twins called out to them, beaming with smiles. Arya hurried over to hug them, silently apologizing for not being able to attend to them earlier. Nathaniel joined her, reaching out to ruffle the boys' hair with a smile, drawing giggles from them before patting Andrew on the back and heading to the head of the table. Arya let her eyes sweep over the table. She noticed the large platter of steaming king crab placed in the center, surrounded by bowls of creamy clam chowder. Then there was a tray of seared wild Alaskan salmon, paired with wild rice speckled with herbs. A platter of reindeer sausage and smoked venison steaks was set beside it, their smoky, earthy scent blending with the rest of the offerings. A bowl of roasted root vegetables, carrots, beets, and Brussels sprouts sat in the corner of the table, while a delicate Arctic char salad was placed nearby. Freshly baked bread was positioned next to it. The idea of combining Alaskan flavors with traditional gourmet dishes brought a smile to her face. The spread reminded her of when her aunt would cook up a storm during the festive seasons. She turned her gaze to the older woman, who was busy supervising Liam and Owen as they served their food. Arya settled into the middle seat between Nathaniel and Andrew, letting her eyes sweep around the table, silently noting that everyone was present at the table except for Tom Hill and Miss Bella. And then Yen. She silently wondered where she was and thought perhaps she had stepped out or something. "I hope Mr. Hill's and Miss Bella's food has been taken to their cottage," Arya asked Mary, who was placing a platter of dessert in the center of the table. "Yes, madam," Mary quickly responded. Arya nodded in gratitude. "Thank you, Mary," she said. Mary smiled in response. Early on, Will shut his eyes as his lips met Kim's, the corners of his mouth twitching as he reveled in the surge of desire that rushed through him. He couldn't understand why he was so hyper-aware of her, why her touch made him feel this way, but he wanted more. The level of indulgence he was ready to sink into, the sheer decadence she awakened in him, was thrilling. He didn't consciously remember picking her up, but he was fully aware she was no longer out of reach. Her back was now pressed against the wall, her arms wrapped around his neck in an intimately endearing way that tugged at his heart. It was as though she had him in a headlock, her arms crossed at the back of his head, holding him firmly in place, ensuring he couldn't retreat or disappear. Will's hands wandered beneath her dress, hitching it up as he felt her soft, warm flesh. "This is when you apply the brakes, Kim," he murmured, pressing hard against her parted legs. "Or this might get out of hand." He chuckled, his voice low and rough. "It's kind of becoming our MO now, baby." "What if I don't want to apply the brakes?" Kim breathed, nibbling on his lips. She loved how closely he pressed against her, the idea of separating from him making her want to whimper. Especially knowing how incredible it would feel if they kept going, how much insane pleasure he could draw from her body, playing her like an instrument. Will playfully bit her lip, feeling his body respond to the delicate quiver that ran through her. "Are you saying you want me, Kim?" he teased, grinning, his voice mellow and soothing. "It's your fault," she replied, making him chuckle, "but we have to use protection. We didn't last time," she added in a soft whisper. "Do you have a reason I should be worried, babe?" Will asked, his tone light and unconcerned. "No," Kim replied, pausing her kisses, but Will took over again, making her groan. "Are you perhaps afraid of carrying my child, then?" he rasped. Kim's entire body trembled at the thought. She breathed heavily through parted lips, giving him room to thrust his tongue into her mouth, tasting, exploring, nibbling. His movements were slow and deliberate, unhurried yet full of intent. "You need to answer me, baby. Are you scared of carrying my child?" he pressed, his voice thick with emotion, the conversation somehow intensifying his feelings for her. "Having a baby is a very serious decision," Kim managed to say, surprised her brain could still function. All she wanted now was for him to soothe the ache building inside her. "That's not an answer, Dr. Kim," Will replied with a smirk. "Hypothetically speaking, no, I'm not scared," she admitted, though she hesitated. "Although—" Will silenced her with a fervent kiss. Kim felt him shift, carrying her deeper into the darkened room as he kissed her more passionately than before. "Will," she moaned, her voice low and trembling. "I'm not using protection with you, Kim," he murmured, the words sending a thrill through her before he claimed her lips again. Back at the log house, they were already halfway through dinner when Arya noticed Yen sneaking inside, hurrying to take the empty seat beside Claire. Claire grinned at her, and Yen darted a furtive glance in Arya's direction. When their eyes met, Yen grinned and gave an awkward wave. Arya didn't notice Will sauntering in next. He moved with deliberate nonchalance, but Jake noticed, and so did Andrew. The two exchanged a look before turning their attention to Dr. Yen, who was now serving herself food, her face lowered as if to hide. Jake smirked, lowering his gaze as he chuckled softly. "What's funny?" Evangeline asked in a hushed whisper. "Eat," Jake replied, giving her a sidelong glance and arching an eyebrow. Evangeline playfully hit his arm, but her heart raced when she caught the way his eyes darkened, assessing her with a smoldering intensity. Heat flooded her face, and she slowly lowered her gaze. Jake reached for her hand and held onto it. A few minutes later, Jake checked his watch and glanced at Andrew, noticing he had relaxed in his seat and finished eating. His gaze shifted to Charles, who was discreetly being fed dessert by Claire. Jake then darted a quick look around the table at Anton, Will, Adam, Ash, Aidan, Lewis, and Stephen, noting that everyone else also seemed to be done with their meals. Finally, Jake returned his focus to Andrew, but didn't make any move to get his attention. Soon enough, the older man looked his way, and Jake held his gaze before rising from his seat. "Excuse me, babe," Jake whispered to Evangeline with a warm smile. Evangeline nodded, sensing he was about to handle something related to her phone, or Luke greet him. She gave him a searching look, and Jake winked at her, an affectionate gleam lighting his blue eyes. At the other end of the table, Andrew also excused himself, leaning over to give Anita a quick peck on the lips. As Jake headed out, Andrew followed close behind. Their movement seemed to signal the others as Aidan rose from his seat, followed by Ash. Charles sighed audibly before standing, and one by one the men excused themselves from the table. A low murmur of polite apologies rippled through the room as they nodded towards Nathaniel and Dr. Hawthorne before leaving. Will, however, stayed seated, piling more food onto his plate. He caught Yen looking at him and flashed her a grin before retreating. Yen's attention shifted to Claire, and she caught the other woman giving her a knowing look. "What?" Yen whispered in protest. "You let him do it again, didn't you?" Claire teased, picking up a chocolate chip and tossing it at Yen's face. Yen gasped and swatted at her playfully. Anita, who had overheard Dr. Sterling, leaned closer and whispered, "She let who do what?" Claire turned to meet Anita's wide-eyed, curious expression and burst into giggles. At the other side of the table, Evangeline propped her elbows on the surface, watching the exchange with interest. Anna and Arya, seated at the head of the table, also observed the scene. Anna glanced meaningfully at Arya, and Arya caught the look before getting up. She leaned down to kiss Nathaniel softly on the lips and whispered, "Excuse me, babe," before walking away. Anna followed her lead, pressing a kiss on Alex's lips and drawing the attention of the men as the women began to get up. Isla stood as Noria and Anna pulled her up, with Claire pulling a reluctant Yen along. "Evangeline," Anita called, motioning for her to follow. Evangeline giggled as she carefully rose to join them. "Are we safe?" Ethan joked, watching the women leave. Isla smiled as Anna replied over her shoulder, "You're not safe, Ethan." Ethan chuckled as Anita returned to grab desserts and a few non-alcoholic drinks, with Noria and Claire assisting her. Nathaniel stood and said to Ethan and Alex, "Give me a moment. Let me show the ladies where they can hang out." "Dad, can we come?" Liam chimed in, he and Owen and Tristan watching with growing curiosity. "Don't worry, kid, we'll have our own kind of fun," Ethan reassured him before Nathaniel could respond. Liam frowned skeptically and replied, "I don't know. Aunt Anita tells the best stories." Justin and Alex burst into laughter, especially when Ethan pretended to be offended. "Excuse you, I tell great stories," he protested. Meanwhile, Nathaniel joined the women in the living room. Pulling Arya gently to his side, he kissed the top of her head and said, "All right, ladies, follow me." She Arya grinned up at him as he led her out of the living room and down a hallway, with the others following closely behind. He guided them down a staircase to a short corridor ending at a glass door. Pushing it open, Nathaniel stepped inside with Arya and muttered, "Lights." His deep baritone carried clearly, and the room was instantly bathed in a soft, warm glow. Arya gasped in delight as her eyes took in the sight before her. The room appeared to be carved into an elegant sanctuary, bathed in soft, ambient light. A silvery glow streamed through the arched doorway, casting a shimmering reflection across the tranquil blue water of the indoor pool. The surface rippled gently, and the glint of the water mirrored itself in floor-to-ceiling glass, creating the illusion that the pool stretched endlessly beyond the threshold. Cushioned seating lined one side of the room, the pale fabrics plush and inviting, adorned with textured pillows. A small wooden shelf nestled into the curve of the whitewashed wall displayed carefully chosen decor. A framed painting, seashells, and softly glowing candlelight bulbs. Above, bursts of vivid bougainvillea spilled from the crevices, their bright fuchsia blooms cascading like natural ornaments against the pristine white walls. It was a place where time seemed to stand still, where the world outside dissolved entirely, leaving the feeling of an untouched haven, a world of one's own. Arya looked up into Nathaniel's face as he smiled down at her and softly murmured, "Enjoy." He pressed a gentle kiss to her lips before stepping back and giving the other women, who were watching with smiles, a small nod of acknowledgement. As he turned and stepped into the corridor, he called back over his shoulder, "Dr. Hart, make sure no one gets drunk." Evangeline burst into giggles while Anita feigned annoyance. "We can't even drink," she retorted. "I know," Nathaniel needled with a broad grin. "Go away, Nate," Anita said as she pulled the door shut behind him. The laughter of the women echoed down the hallway. Nathaniel chuckled to himself as he made his way back up to rejoin the others. The ladies settled around the cushioned seats framing the water, dipping their feet into the warm, bubbling pool. Anita passed drinks, chocolate cakes, and brownies around before finding a spot beside Arya. "Ah, this is heaven," she gushed, delighting in the sensation of the water swirling against her feet. "I couldn't help but notice you arrived late to dinner, Yen. I hope everything's okay," Arya said with a note of concern, her serious expression causing Claire to burst into laughter, nearly choking on her fruit wine. Yen flushed red, shooting Claire a glare. "Trust me, boss." "All is well," Claire interjected before Yen could answer. Yen looked sheepish as she sipped her wine, hiding her face behind the glass. "Thank you, boss. I just ran into a slight delay," she muttered in a hushed tone. "More like ran into," Claire added teasingly, coughing to disguise the rest of her sentence. "This is a judgment-free zone," Anna quipped, grinning. "And speaking of no judgment, Alex and I stumbled upon a sauna in the woods earlier. Honestly, it's way too secluded." "Who puts a sauna in such a hidden spot?" she mumbled with a comical flair, earning gasps from Anita and Arya. Evangeline burst out laughing, and the rest of the ladies quickly joined in. "I'm sure we all had our touchdown adventures," Evangeline added in a soft, almost mischievous tone, prompting Anita to gasp dramatically. "Boy, it's always the quiet ones," Anita declared, dipping her hand in the water and sprinkling it on Evangeline as though performing a blessing, making everyone laugh even harder. "At least, regardless of the touchdown adventure, we all remembered to show up to dinner on time," Claire teased. Yen groaned, covering her face with her hands. Arya's eyes widened with comical interest. "Who was it?" she demanded eagerly. "Will," Yen admitted sheepishly. "Oh boy," Anita said, fanning herself dramatically. "She got tangled up with a Hawthorne guard." "Girl, you're pregnant," she quipped, drawing loud laughter from the group. "That about sums it up," Yen groaned, her voice tinged with jest. "I swear he's going to destroy my life, and my... you know what." The ladies erupted into more laughter. "Destroy your life? How?" Isla asked with a smile. "I think my brain turns to cotton every time he touches me. All I want to do is stay in his arms. I'm a doctor. That is not sustainable." Yen exclaimed, her tone a mix of bemusement, bewilderment, and humor. The enclosed space echoed with laughter. Girl, I know what you mean, Anita chimed in. The first time I saw Andrew naked, I was like, God in heaven, thank you for bringing this man into my life. He is going to tear me up and eat me whole, and I am ready to perish, she said in an exaggerated preacher's voice, sending the women into fits of uncontrollable laughter. After about 30 minutes of laughing and being downright silly, Dr. Yen asked in a serious tone, Why are they like that, though? Will outright asked me if I'd be okay getting pregnant for him. It's so strange. I mean, it's nothing like the men we deal with in the outside world. Her voice held a mix of amusement and genuine curiosity. That's because they know they could be gone at any moment, Arya replied softly, her tone tinged with sadness. The comment made Yen's chest tighten as a wave of fear rushed through her at the idea of finding Will wounded or worse. Her hands trembled slightly as she set her drink down, suddenly losing any enjoyment in its taste. Anita nodded in agreement. They don't play games. They either like you or they don't. And if they do like you, but sense even a hint of dishonesty or betrayal, that's it. It's over. Imagine losing a man like that because of something foolish, she said with a sigh, her voice weighted with seriousness and her expression clouded with disapproval. Every time I see Aiden suiting up, I'm terrified it might be the last time I see him alive, Noria admitted hesitantly. Arya reached over and gently took her hand, offering a comforting smile when their eyes met. I remember when Anton came to rescue me and brought me to New York. He'd been shot and was dying, yet he spent the entire flight joking and being silly. Meeting someone who could take a bullet for you and still have the strength to walk away just to protect you from themselves. It leaves a mark. I'll always be grateful to Nate for building a brotherhood like that, showing us that there's a difference between ordinary men and exceptional ones, she said, her voice heavy with emotion. You're all going to make me cry, Evangeline murmured, already wiping her eyes. A soft chuckle rippled through the room. As Isla listened to the women speak, a profound sense of calm washed over her. Their voices and genuinity of emotions made her feel included, like she belonged to a group where she was protected and no longer alone. It made her a tad emotional. Isla had always struggled with friendships, but these women had embraced her from the start. Sometimes she had to remind herself it wasn't a dream. How had she been so fortunate to meet people like her boss's wife and still feel surrounded by genuine, caring individuals? There was no gossip, no backstabbing, no scheming, no queen bee energy, just pure kindness and support. For the first time in a long while, she felt free to express herself openly, to speak her mind, and to feel completely at ease. I'm not dating a Hawthorne guard, Isla admitted shyly, drawing laughter from the group. But I'm in awe that I can sit here with all of you and truly feel at home, she added. All? Anna, Anita, and Evangeline chorused, while Arya, Yen, and Noria smiled warmly at her. And it still amazes me that Dr. Hawthorne is part of this gathering, and Anna Morris too, she said, causing another round of laughter. Oh, my boss is a sweetheart. She doesn't have a mean bone in her body, Claire said with a grin. She's so nice it's almost sickening, Anita teased. Hey, I'm sitting right here, Arya retorted, pretending to be offended. Anita pulled her close with an arm around her shoulders. She's my best friend forever, though, Anita declared, making Arya laugh. Hey, what am I? Chopped liver? Anna protested, making everyone laugh even harder. I can have more than one BFF, Anna, Arya replied quickly, eliciting another burst of laughter, especially when Anita gasped dramatically and pulled away from her. Take that back, or the angel-faced little mama over there gets thrown into the water, Anita threatened, gesturing at Evangeline. The younger woman gasped, wide-eyed, and asked, What did I do? The room echoed with laughter, the sound filling the space and warming Isla's heart. She blinked, her eyes open, her gaze settling on the shimmering water. As she looked toward the other side, she recognized Noria, Dr. Hart, and Anna Morris. A small, contented smile formed on her lips before she turned her focus to Dr. Hawthorne and Anita. Her heartbeat quickened as a wave of emotion washed over her. Her vision was slightly blurry, but she was certain it was nothing a pair of corrective lenses couldn't fix. Dr. Hawthorne? She called softly, her voice a tad shaky, ready to tell her. Outside the door, Liam, Owen, and Tristan, who had sneaked away from the men to eavesdrop on the women's conversation, pressed their ears against the sturdy, noise-proof door. Though the voices inside were indistinct, they could hear bursts of laughter interspersed with the occasional sound of sobs. The range of emotions puzzled them, and their frowns deepened in confusion. "I don't get it." They laugh, then cry, and then laugh again, Liam whispered, throwing his hands up in quiet frustration. "I think we should just stick to Uncle Ethan's boring stories," Owen said, nodding in agreement. "Yeah, chicks are complicated. That's probably why my dad always says, 'Your mum is so unreal,'" Tristan added with a knowing sigh, mimicking his dad's deep voice. "All right, let's go back," Liam said in defeat. "But if I hear Uncle Ethan talk about his school camping trip one more time, I'm going to scream," Liam grumbled. "He's just trying to give us helpful camping tips." "But yeah, it's boring," Owen replied, as the three boys left the door and made their way back to the men. Early on, Jake led the other Hawthorne guards outside, toward the gazebo built out back. The structure was supported by strong wooden beams with an open design and exposed arching braces. String lights hung beneath the roof, casting a warm, inviting glow. As Jake drew closer, he saw a comfortable seating area inside, with wicker-style chairs and plush cushions arranged around a coffee table. Adjacent to the seating area was an outdoor bar with high stools. The centerpiece was a built-in stone fireplace, complete with a mantel and a crackling fire that added both warmth and charm. Above the fireplace was a flat-screen TV, and one of the Hawthorne staff members stood behind the bar. The structure stood like an oasis amidst the snowy plain. The men filed into the gazebo, exchanging greetings with the man behind the bar and admiring the warmth of the fire. "How's it going, Dave?" Andrew greeted. "It's really cold, boss," the man replied with a grin, making the men chuckle. They spread out, some sitting in the wicker chairs, others leaning against the wooden beams or standing by the bar. Dave began preparing drinks, offering a selection suited to the chilly atmosphere. First, he poured deep amber whiskey for Jake and Andrew, the rich scent of oak and spice filling the air as he slid the glasses across the counter. "Thanks, man," Andrew muttered. Jake gave a simple nod of acknowledgement. "I'll take something lighter, please," Aidan said. The man mixed gin and tonic, garnishing it with fresh lemon slices. The bubbles caught the light from the string lights above. For Anton and Will, Dave made steaming mugs of mulled wine, the sweet aroma of cinnamon and cloves mingling with the scent of burning wood from the fireplace. He then served hot spiked cider to Ash and Stephen, topping the warm spiced apple drink with a slice of orange and a cinnamon stick. Dave continued to attend to the men as they settled into the cozy setting, the crackling fire blending with their voices and the howling wind outside. Jake settled into the seat opposite Andrew, leaned forward and pulled out Evangeline's phone, opening the message she had received earlier before passing it to Andrew. Andrew took the phone and read the message, as did Charles, who was sitting to his left. "What's that?" Aidan asked. Andrew passed the phone to Charles, who then passed it to Aidan. One by one, the men took their seats and passed the phone around until it returned to Jake. He took it and handed it to Anton. "Help me change the SIM, will you? And can we figure out where this idiot is?" Jake asked. Anton took the phone with a nod and sat back, pulling out his own phone. "Let's see what we have here first," Anton muttered in response. Andrew ran his hands over his face and then through his hair. He already knew the trip to Sylvan Ridge was meant to be a working holiday, but they had planned ahead, anticipating the Blackwoods' moves and preparing to counter them. Now, with Luke Greetham added to the mix, it was an unwelcome complication. He knew they had agreed to give Dr. Hart sanctuary, and though she was now practically family and pregnant, her situation added to their burden. He would have preferred no additional headaches, but here they were. Jake, studying the older man, said, "I'd like to hunt him down before he finds us. All I need is backup, so the boss doesn't notice my absence and Evangeline doesn't worry too much." "Of course you have backup, Jake. This isn't all on you," Andrew replied, slightly irritated that Jake felt the need to ask. "I'd prefer we have a relatively peaceful vacation for once, but still, we're in this together." "It's hunting season, people," Aidan declared loudly, then added in a hushed tone, "I've always wondered what it's like tracking down a criminal in a snowy mountainous plain," he joked, causing everyone to laugh. "Must be so much fun," Freezing cold and all, he added sarcastically. Makes you mad as hell, ready to kick some ass, Lewis chipped in. When and where do we start? Will asked. Local pub, both Jake and Andrew replied. It's always the local pub, Ash muttered in a low, rumbling tone. Anyone in the mood for a quick bar crawl? Jake said, downing his drink and getting up. Will, Lewis, Ash, and Aidan stood as well. When Charles made to stand, Andrew shot him a withering glance. What? Charles retorted. I can't unleash you, Jake, Aidan, and Ash on an innocent community all at once, Andrew said. A loud roar of laughter echoed through the gazebo. Charles glared at Andrew. What about Lewis? He's more volatile than I am, Charles shot back. Jake wouldn't let him, Andrew replied, his eyes scanning the men standing. Noting the addition of Anton, Aidan, Adam, Lewis, and Ash to Jake's group, he said, no bar fights, no unnecessary aggression. Ask questions, make alleys, and come right back. He directed his gaze specifically at Lewis and Adam. What are you looking at me for? I'll have you know I'm the most socially tolerant person in this group. Ash isn't even supposed to be allowed out of this camp, Lewis said. And what's that supposed to mean? Ash shot back. Christ help me, Andrew groaned, cradling his head. Jake chuckled and said, All right, kids, we have... He paused to check his watch and added, 2 hours before we're missed. Let's get in and get back. The men downed their drinks and filed out. I really think you should tell Adam and Lewis to sit this one out, Charles said with amusement. I guess Jake can handle them, Andrew said, then added, I pray he can. Charles burst out laughing. Nathaniel watched as the boys trudged back, their faces etched with disappointment. The corners of his lips twitched into a smile as they tried to sneak back to their seats, as though he, Ethan, Alex, and Justin wouldn't notice 3 human beings had suddenly disappeared. He enjoyed how the other adults pretended not to notice as well. Nathaniel's eyes followed the boys as the 3 of them squeezed onto a single-seater couch, whispering among themselves. So are you boys ready to hear more about boot camp and the adventures of Uncle Ethan? Ethan teased. The boys let out a loud groan, and Nathaniel, Alex, and Justin burst into laughter. One more word and I'm going to jump, Liam threatened, scowling. Jump? From where? Ethan prodded with mock seriousness. Nathaniel laughed as Liam arched an eyebrow at him. He loved how fearless and outspoken Liam was, unlike Owen, who was more reserved. Nathaniel knew, however, that Owen wasn't shy. He was just blunt and preferred to speak only when it was most necessary. Liam, on the other hand, spoke his mind freely and often in the most adorably unfiltered ways. All right, Nathaniel said as he got up from his seat. I was going to wait until morning to show you guys, but... He paused, glancing at his watch. Since everyone seems to be doing their own thing, and it's still early, let me show you a little surprise I have for you. The boys' faces lit up with excitement. As Nathaniel beckoned them over, the other men rose to follow. Owen and Liam rushed to Nathaniel's side, each grabbing one of his hands. Noticing Tristan standing a little apart, Owen pulled him closer to Nathaniel, then let go of Nathaniel's hand so Tristan could hold it instead. Nathaniel smiled down at the boys, and Justin, watching the scene unfold, felt his heart swell with emotion. He figured he couldn't expect anything less from children raised by Ariana Everly. So is it true you're finally giving Pam the boot? Ethan asked Justin in a hushed tone. Justin let out a sigh. I don't think there's anything left to hold on to, he replied, his voice low and somber. Man, I wonder if anyone warned you about marrying a potential witch, Ethan said, his tone contemplative. Then he made a time-out gesture and growled, Oh, someone did. Justin flashed a sheepish grin. But you have to admit she was hot, he quipped. You don't marry hot, Justin. You marry decent, kind, forgiving, tolerant, loving, and then sure hot. You don't marry a witch just because she's hot, Ethan countered. Fine, you were right, Justin replied, his tone long-suffering. She's going to clean you out and try to take your son. By the way, if you need someone to testify about how terrible your ex was, I'll gladly do it, Ethan said. As a matter of fact, I bet I can get the judge to put Liam on the stand. That would be gold to watch. Justin and Alex burst into laughter. Seriously, I'd love to see Liam questioned about Pamela Anderson. Oh boy, I'd pay to be in that courtroom, Ethan added, grinning as he imagined the outrageous things Liam Hawthorne would say with a straight face, completely unapologetic. He chuckled to himself at the thought. Nathaniel led the group down the same corridor as the indoor pool where the ladies were, but farther along. He asked them to wait as he went ahead into a room just down the hallway. Owen and Liam exchanged excited glances. Whenever their dad promised a surprise, it was always something amazing, and they couldn't wait to see what it was this time. The two boys began fidgeting with excitement, making the three adults behind them chuckle. Soon enough, Nathaniel reappeared in the doorway. "All right, come on," he beckoned. The boys rushed ahead while Justin, Alex, and Ethan followed. "Oh my God," Tristan exclaimed in a low whisper, his face etched with awe as they entered the room. "Awesome," the twins chorused before sprinting forward, but just as they passed their dad, they stopped, turned around, and ran back to him. Throwing their arms around his legs, they hugged him tightly. Nathaniel gave them a gentle pat on the back and leaned down, tapping Tristan's nose with a playful boop as the twins echoed together, "Thanks, Dad." "That's all right, go have fun," he urged with a smile. Alex took in the room, his face lighting up at the setup. One side of the room exuded cozy luxury. The dimly lit interior was enveloped in warm, muted hues. Plush leather recliners were arranged in tiers, ensuring an unobstructed view of the massive screen that dominated one wall. The screen glowed brightly, displaying a vibrant sports stadium scene, the green field sharply contrasting with the darkened theatre. Rich burgundy panels lined the walls, accented with ornate sconces that emitted a soft golden light. The gentle glow cast shadows that added depth to the room's intimate ambience. Every detail seemed tailored for comfort and immersion, from the overstuffed cushions to the warm wooden accents framing the space. The other side of the room was a stark contrast, a futuristic haven bathed in a surreal blue glow. The ceiling was an artistic masterpiece, mimicking rolling clouds illuminated by soft, ethereal lighting, creating the illusion of a dynamic, otherworldly sky overhead. Against one wall stood a sleek entertainment center. A large screen displayed bold, neon graphics with the words "Game Over" etched in vivid clarity. Surrounding it were shelves lined with gaming consoles, collectibles, and high-tech gadgets. At the heart of the space was a cutting-edge gaming setup. Dual monitors glowed with rainbow-hued lights from an RGB keyboard and gaming peripherals, casting playful reflections across the desk. An ergonomic chair sat ready for action. A plush sofa stretched along another wall, scattered with soft cushions in muted tones. The dark furniture contrasted harmoniously with the glowing blue ambience, creating a balanced yet electrifying energy. "This is... wow," Alex said with a grin. The boys were already gearing up to dive into their adventure. Nathaniel gestured to the home theater corner and quipped, "We can have fun too while babysitting." "Don't mind if I do," Ethan said, strolling ahead and rubbing his hands together in anticipation. Nathaniel called the kitchen to bring in refreshments, and soon their tables were laden with drinks and generously filled bowls of popcorn, the buttery aroma wafting through the air. Meanwhile, in the nearby room where the ladies were gathered, they cheered and congratulated Isla on her progress. "When we go to the hospital in the morning, we can have you see the optician," Arya said. "We'll get you evaluated for possible new glasses. We'll also retake your brain scan and see how things are progressing there." Ela nodded, blinking and noticing how every movement of her lashes seemed to make the faces around her clearer. A profound sense of happiness swirled within her. "Congratulations," Arya added. Something about her soft, sincere tone paired with the warm glow in her earnest eyes made Isla feel unexpectedly emotional. She nodded again, unable to speak, as Claire gently patted her on the back. A few minutes later, Arya excused herself to check on her babies. As she stepped out of the room and shut the door, a faint sound from the far end of the hallway caught her attention. She took tentative steps toward the source. Upon reaching the door, she opened it and peered inside. Her eyes took in the artistic beauty of the space before settling on Owen, Liam, and Tristan, seated with consoles in hand, engrossed in a video game. Nathaniel's familiar deep chuckle drew her attention to the other side of the room, where the men were comfortably seated in plush leather chairs, watching sports. Arya smiled and quietly retreated. She thought about sneaking in to steal a kiss from Nathaniel, but decided her babies needed her more at the moment. A few miles away, 2 jeeps pulled into the parking lot of a bar that stood like a weathered sentinel against the unforgiving Alaskan landscape. Its wooden exterior seemed half buried beneath a blanket of heavy snow. Icicles hung like jagged teeth from the roof's overhang, glinting faintly in the pale lighting of the neon signs and outdoor fixtures. Drifts of snow curled and piled against the stone walls, blurring the line between the structure and the wilderness. The building exhaled rustic charm, its thick logs and sturdy timbers darkened by years of wind and wear, promising warmth within. Above the structure, a wooden totem pole stood tall, its carved wings and faces frozen mid-watch, keeping silent vigil over the bar's entrance. At its peak, perched a solitary raven, black against the snow, as though it too guarded the place. Beside it, a faded sign, half obscured by snow, advertised the bar to passing travelers on roads likely buried just as deeply. The words, "County Cooking and Lodge," peeked through, promising not just shelter but the promise of hearty meals and human company. The stillness in the air was absolute, broken only by the soft hiss of wind curling snow into low drifts. Frosted windows, framed in dark wood, glowed faintly from within, casting dim amber warmth against the cold night. In the distance, the silhouette of a mountain range loomed against the dark sky. Jake climbed out of the driver's seat of the front jeep, while Will stepped down from the other. The rest of the group followed, milling after Jake as he headed toward the bar's entrance. Inside the bar was a sanctuary of wood and warmth. Its honeyed pine walls were alive with history, adorned with taxidermy mounts of deer heads, moose antlers, and outstretched birds, frozen mid-flight or mid-gaze. A sprawling stag's head, its antlers splayed wide like jagged branches, dominated the far wall, overseeing the room with quiet authority. String lights wound along the ceiling, their soft glow mingling with festive green garlands draped over doorways. Old photographs, dusty memorabilia, and ornate plates hung in mismatched clusters on the walls. To the left, a long sturdy bar stretched out, its polished surface gleaming from years of use. Patrons perched on wooden stools hunched over beers and murmured conversation. Men in thick coats and weathered flannel leaned in close, their laughter crackling like fire in the still air. Behind the bar, bottles of liquor glinted like amber jewels in the dim light. A narrow walkway led deeper into the bar where shadows thickened, and the air grew richer with the scent of wood smoke and whiskey. At the far end, red tables were set with quiet care. Jake's eyes scanned every face and alternate exits, a habit honed over time. As he moved along the pathway toward the bar, heads began to turn in his direction. The attention grew sharper when Aidan strolled in behind him, followed by Anton. By the time Will entered, every sound had ceased, and every pair of eyes trailed them. Unlike the others who scanned the room without recognizing anyone, Adam noticed Dr. Juliet Bennett and Dr. Cassandra Fields seated in a corner booth, eating. Though Dr. Bennett tried to hide as soon as she saw him, Adam chuckled to himself. "This should be interesting," he muttered under his breath. Lewis entered after Adam, his gaze also seeking the crowd. His eyes settled on the 2 doctors in the corner. When his gaze met Dr. Fields, he gave her a curt nod before looking away, ignoring the flutter in his chest. Determined not to give in to the obvious attraction to the petite woman, he reminded himself of why he was there. He certainly wasn't looking for entanglements. Women were the last thing he needed, complicating his already settled life. Jake approached the bar, leaning casually on the counter as he met and held the gaze of the barkeeper. "A whiskey for me and my guys," he said, his deep voice carrying around the counter. The bartender, a burly man with a grizzled beard, nodded. "Sure thing. Don't think I've seen your face around here before." He began pouring drinks with practice ease. "First time," Jake replied, scanning the room again as the bartender set the glass down in front of him. Before the conversation could go further, Aidan joined Jake at the bar, followed by the rest of the group, who claimed the nearby empty stools. The bartender let out a low whistle and called out, "Hey, Sally, give me a hand here." A moment later, a young woman with jet black hair emerged from the back. Her light green eyes scanned the group with a darting, hooded gaze as she tied an apron around her waist. "What's up?" she asked curtly. "Help me out with these guys," the bartender said, nodding toward Jake and his group. Sally nodded and began serving, her eyes holding and meeting the men's eyes one after the other. Aidan took a sip of the whiskey he was handed, his face twisting in disgust at the bland taste. He scoffed audibly, drawing Sally's attention. "Something wrong with your drink?" she asked, her voice laced with irritation as she shot him a glare. "It's watered down and tastes like crap," Aidan said bluntly, making some of the other patrons chuckle. Sally's eyes narrowed. "You've got some balls walking into someone's place and criticizing their service." Aidan shrugged, flashing her a faint grin. "Just calling it like I taste it, ma'am," he quipped. The tension eased as the men at the bar laughed quietly, and the rest of the patrons gradually turned back to their own conversations. The bar's noise returned to its usual hum of chatter and clinking glasses. Jake leaned forward, slipping a folded piece of paper under several bills and sliding it across the counter to the bartender. "Seen this guy?" he asked in a low voice. The bartender unfolded the paper, revealing a printed picture of Luke Greetham. He studied it for a moment before shaking his head. Sally, curious, stepped closer to take a look. "Why are you looking for him?" she asked, giving Jake a searching gaze, her tone low and laced with caution. Jake's expression hardened as he said, "Attempted murder, attempted rape, and assault against my lady." Sally's gaze burrowed into his, her piercing green eyes assessing him for a moment. Finally, she nodded. "We'll let you know if someone like that shows up here." The bartender cleared his throat. "Pardon me for asking, but are you guys cops?" Jake shook his head. Ex-Marines." The bartender's eyes widened slightly before he gave a slow nod. "Got it. No problem, man." Jake tapped the paper. "My number's on the back." The bartender folded the paper and money, slipping them into his pocket. "Understood." "Thanks," Jake said, his voice firm but polite. Ash, seated to Jake's left, picked up his drink and turned around, leaning against the bar with his back to it, keeping the exit doors in his line of sight. He noticed the moment the men he had seen bothering Dr. Juliet Bennett at the hospital earlier entered through the doors closest to where the ladies were sitting. At the same time, Adam, who was 2 stools away, also noticed the men's entrance. Ash glanced at Adam, and the two exchanged a brief look before refocusing on the ladies' direction. Adam's eyes remained fixed on the doctors, observing their stiffened posture as the 2 men approached their table. Lewis, unlike the other men, didn't notice when the 2 men entered or approached Dr. Bennett and Dr. Fields' table. He was about to take a sip of his drink when his eyes instinctively darted to where Dr. Fields was seated. He saw her glaring up at 2 men who were squeezing into the booth with them, forcing the 2 women to scoot over. Lewis didn't stop to think about the situation. He didn't question whether the women needed help or even if they knew the men. All he saw was Cassandra's displeasure. Without hesitation, he set down his drink, grabbed the bottle the barmaid had been pouring from, ignoring her questioning look, and pushed back from the table. Ash and Adam noticed him only when he was halfway there. "Ah, for the love of... Who are those guys?" Jake groaned, already anticipating where this was heading. "Some locals," Ash replied. "We saw them earlier at the hospital bothering the red-headed doctor, after which Adam kissed her. Dude, for the umpteenth time, she kissed me." Adam interjected, clearly annoyed. Will chuckled, earning a sharp glare from Adam. Ash shrugged, unfazed. "I don't know who kissed who, but after locking lips with the doctor and scaring those guys off, he ran after her to kiss her some more." "Andrew saw them," he said, his tone both humorous and bored. Jake stifled a laugh, but the others burst out laughing, much to Adam's irritation. As Lewis reached the doctor's table, he overheard Dr. Juliet Bennett say, "Please don't get me in trouble with my boyfriend." The man beside her chuckled, letting his eyes roam over her as he replied, "You look like a woman worth fighting for, and I'm not one to give up so easily." Dr. Cassandra Fields snapped back immediately. "My God, we're not interested. Stop being such a creep and get lost." Lewis couldn't help but admire her boldness. These men looked like trouble, intimidating and somewhat threatening, yet she chose the most direct way to get rid of them. "I'm sorry I'm late," Lewis said as he came to a stop beside the table and dropped his glass cup and the bottle of whiskey at the center of the table. Everyone in the booth turned their attention toward him. "Oh, great! It's those guys again," the smaller man muttered under his breath, clearly annoyed. The larger, rougher-looking man stood up, trying to impose his presence. However, he barely reached Lewis's chest. Lewis noticed the flicker of uncertainty in the man's eyes before he squared his shoulders, clenched his jaw, and growled, "I know what you and your kind are, but this is my town. Around here, we don't take kindly to strangers acting like they own the place. My advice..." He didn't get to finish. Lewis grabbed him by the collar of his jacket. When the smaller man reached into his own jacket, likely for a weapon, Lewis moved quickly. He struck the smaller man hard across the face, shoving him into the wooden paneling. Still holding the larger man by the collar, Lewis reached into the smaller man's jacket and pulled out a rugged Colt .45 revolver. Without hesitation, he struck him again with the butt of the gun, sending him crumpling to the floor. Lewis calmly placed the weapon on the table beside his glass cup and bottle of whiskey before turning back to the man in his grip, whose face had turned pale as the collar tightened against his throat. "Please stop bothering the ladies," Lewis said in a calm, mellow tone. The man in his grip croaked, unable to speak, his eyes bulging. Suddenly, Lewis felt the cold barrel of a gun pressed against his back. "Please, gentlemen, there's no need for violence. These men were pestering us, and this gentleman was only trying to make them stop," Dr. Cassandra Fields said quickly, her London-accented voice sounding posh and composed. "He could have just said it real nice. You city folk ain't nothing but trouble," the man holding the gun to Lewis's back replied. "We actually did, several times I might add. But these lads just wouldn't take the hint and leave us be," Dr. Juliet Bennett interjected, her usual composure slipping as a faint Scottish brogue coloured her words. The man behind Lewis opened his mouth to respond, but Lewis moved suddenly. He twisted to the side, using the edge of his hand to strike the man's wrist. The gun fell from his grip as he cried out in pain. Lewis caught the weapon, slammed the barrel against the wall to break it, and threw the man he'd been holding into the gunman, sending both men crashing to the floor in a heap. Lewis calmly picked up his drink and the bottle he'd set down earlier. His gaze shifted from Dr. Cassandra Fields to Dr. Juliet Bennett as he said in a low, calm voice, "How about you come with us? It'd be much safer." The two doctors exchanged glances, their eyes darting from Lewis to the men sprawled on the floor. A mix of awe and uncertainty played across their faces. Lewis turned to leave and noticed Adam, Anton, Ash, and Jake approaching, with Jake leading the way. Just as another man started forward, fury written across his face, the barkeep hollered from behind the counter. "Hey, you want a brawl? Take it outside. You bust anything in here, you're paying for it, and don't bother coming back." "He hit Doug," the angry man shouted, pointing at Lewis. "Yeah, well, Doug should have kept his damn nose out of trouble," the barkeep shot back, his tone gruff. Lewis continued walking toward the other men, ushering Dr. Juliet Bennett and Dr. Cassandra Fields ahead of him. Jake breathed a sigh of relief, thinking it could be worse, just as the man the bartender had told to stand down let out a dismissive curse and lunged at Lewis with a knife drawn. Ash intercepted him, knocking the knife out of his hand just as he slammed his open palm into the man's chest, then lifted him with the heel of his hand before slamming him hard onto the cold wooden floor. A loud gasp echoed through the expansive space. The man wheezed pathetically, "Are you hard of hearing?" Ash growled, glaring down at the man. His eyes, a deep, purplish hue, gleamed in the dim light. A few men nearby recoiled in shock, and one even made the sign of the cross. Jake patted Ash on the back, silently signaling for him to stand down. They all began to move towards the door, and Jake returned to the bar. He counted out more bills, dropping them on the counter, then threw an apologetic glance at Sally before following the others outside. Upon stepping outside, Juliet leaned toward Cassandra and asked, "We're really not following them, are we?" Cassandra glanced at her and replied, "Maybe he just said that to get us out of there." Adam, overhearing their conversation as he walked up behind them, said, "No, he didn't. It's safer to stick with us, at least for the night. Who knows what those guys might think if you head back to wherever you're staying." The women looked back at him, but the dim light made it hard to see his eyes clearly. "Do you two stay with Dr. Hawthorne and Dr. Rowan?" Dr. Juliet Bennet asked, giving him a searching look. Adam understood the reason for her question and answered, "Our job is to protect the Hawthornes and everyone associated with them. Dr. Rowan works for Dr. Hawthorne, just like you do." "Wah." Dr. Juliet Bennet slowly nodded and lowered her gaze. She exchanged a glance with Dr. Cassandra Fields, who nodded in return before looking toward Lewis. Soon they were all back in the Jeep, heading toward the last bar Jake had pinpointed near the Everly Ranch. The two women squeezed in between Adam and Lewis. When they arrived, Lewis got out, leaving Adam to stay and watch the ladies. "What's with you guys moving from one bar to the next?" Dr. Juliet Bennet asked, daring to glance sideways at Adam. "I have no idea," he lied, a smirk tugging at the corners of his lips. "So your friends just tell you to hop in, and you follow along?" Dr. Juliet Bennet shot back, irritation evident in her tone. "Sometimes it's better not to be too nosy. It keeps you out of trouble," Adam replied. The doctor raised an eyebrow at him in annoyance. "That's not being nosy, that's being sensible." "Huh, and you know so much about being sensible, don't you?" he teased. She glared at him. "That's kind of questionable, considering you can blatantly kiss a stranger," he added in a hushed tone, needling her. "I was desperate and I regret it, trust me," she scoffed in an equally low tone. "Nah, can't trust someone who can't be." "Sensible," he jeered. Juliet rolled her eyes, looked away, folded her arms over her chest, and muttered, "I can't wait to get out of this damn car," her frustration clear. When Dr. Cassandra Fields subtly cleared her throat, Juliet turned her attention toward her, only to see the other woman fighting back a laugh. Juliet shot her a glare. "I didn't kiss him," she insisted defensively. Cassandra nodded, though the gleam of laughter in her eyes suggested otherwise. Not long after, Jake returned with the other men. Dr. Fields's eyes briefly met with Lewis's as he climbed back inside the car. Lewis felt the doctor's side pressing snugly against his, the warmth of her legs distracting him and conjuring unwelcome thoughts. He couldn't wait to get back to the ranch. "Apologies, Dr. Bennet and Dr. Fields. I'm afraid we had to get you caught up in a brief mission of ours, but we're heading back to the ranch now," Jake called back from the driver's seat, his voice deep and polite. "Thank you for stepping in for us, though it's going to make living here a bit more difficult than it already is. But what can we do?" Dr. Cassandra Fields replied. "You don't sound like you're enjoying it much here," Aidan chimed in. "Oh, we do," Dr. Juliet Bennet quickly replied. "We just wish some men would take the hint and leave us the hell alone," she added with an overly bright smile. Adam knew the jab was also aimed at him. The damn woman, he thought to himself. "So what's the history between you and those clowns?" Jake asked. "A very short history," Dr. Fields quipped. "For some reason, Doug, the big guy, thinks he's got a chance with Dr. Juliet Bennet. And his sidekick Todd figured it's a buy one, get one free deal," she added. The men chuckled, but Lewis didn't. He found the notion highly irritating. "It started like some harmless pursuit until Doug showed up at our apartment in the middle of the night claiming his Jeep broke down, and our house was the closest place for refuge," Dr. Fields continued. "And he thought it was bad manners for me to shut the door and leave him there. Told him I'm from Brooklyn, New York. I don't have time for foolishness," Dr. Bennet added. Adam smirked. He found it quite funny that someone who sounded like they were from Pittsburgh could claim they were from New York. He thought he'd love to needle her about it, but he wasn't about to get his head chewed off. The lady was the epitome of her fiery red hair when she was mad. "Where are you from, Dr. Fields?" Anton asked with interest. "I grew up in London with my family, but I studied medicine at Johns Hopkins University. It's every new medical student's dream to work with the best in the field, and having Dr. Rowan as a mentor was an incredible opportunity," she replied. "What made you move here to Sylvan Ridge?" Lewis asked, his deep voice sounding somewhat raspy, as though it had been out of use. "Like I said, getting the opportunity to work with the best in the field is everything, and so is having the chance to prove yourself. So when someone like Dr. Hawthorne says she needs medical staff and you're lucky enough to be chosen, it really doesn't matter where, as long as you can make an impact," she replied, her eyes briefly locking with Lewis's. He nodded and looked away. "I call bullshit. I'm sure it's for the money, Adam quipped, making everyone laugh. Except for Dr. Juliet Bennett, who shot him a glare. Adam grinned. I'll talk to my boss. Maybe he can come up with a better living arrangement for you two. You shouldn't be harassed just because you're women and on your own. Jake said. Thank you, Dr. Cassandra Fields replied, with a warm smile. When they reached the ranch, as they climbed out of the jeeps, Jake said, Lewis, you're in charge of Dr. Cassandra Fields. Make sure she eats and find her a warm place to sleep. Lewis froze as if Jake had just asked him to behead the woman. He shot a what the hell look at Jake. Jake ignored him and added, and you, Adam, do the same for Dr. Juliet Bennett. Adam gaped at Jake. See you in the morning, Jake said to the doctors, tipping an imaginary hat before walking away. Aidan and Anton fell in step with him. Ash, who was behind the men, chuckled to himself. Adam and Lewis stood in silence for a moment, each processing the situation. Adam was certain Lewis was silently plotting ways to make Jake pay for dragging him into this chaos. The tension in Lewis's stiff posture, clenched fists, and tightly set jaw made his frustration unmistakable. Finally, Lewis turned to Dr. Fields and said, You may want to come with me, Doc, motioning with his hand. His expression remained cold and unreadable, betraying no trace of his irritation. Of course, Dr. Fields muttered, casting a quick glance at Dr. Bennett and shrugging as if to say, What else can we do? Juliet, however, was not so easily swayed. Why can't we just stay together? She questioned, a hint of unease in her tone. Without pausing, Lewis responded over his shoulder. The cottages are all assigned. The main building is packed with the Hawthornes, and I'm not sharing a cottage with Adam. Hey, excuse you? Adam exclaimed, clearly offended. Ignoring him, Lewis continued as if Adam hadn't spoken. You don't need to worry about being disturbed. Our job is to protect you, and that's what we're here to do, nothing more. He stressed the last part for emphasis. All right, I guess, Juliet said hesitantly. She then called out to Cassandra, See you in the morning? The other doctor returned the sentiment. Juliet then turned reluctantly to Adam, clearly less than thrilled about the arrangement. Adam, realizing he had no choice but to attend to the irritable doctor, decided he might as well get on with it, or at least have some fun with it. He considered the location of his cottage, just 100 meters away, if they took the shortcut through the garden. However, there was a longer route, primarily for vehicles, that tripled the distance. As the snow began to fall more heavily, Adam looked up, and a mischievous grin spread across his face. This way, Dr. Bennett, he said with exaggerated politeness, gesturing for her to follow as he set off. Juliet hesitated, sensing trouble in his demeanor, but the worsening snowfall gave her little choice. With a resigned sigh, she followed, grateful she'd worn practical boots. She couldn't help but think that if they had stayed in and cooked instead of venturing to the county lounge for a change of scenery, they wouldn't be in this predicament. Still, she reasoned, they couldn't live like hermits forever. Adam led Juliet down the main road, walking along the edge where piles of snow hemmed the path. The road hadn't been treated with salt to prevent slipperiness just yet, making the journey treacherous. He ignored Juliet's grunts of effort as she struggled to match his pace, her boots slipping occasionally on the wet, icy surface. The sound of her difficulties was quiet amusement to him, though he didn't let it show. After walking about 200 meters, Juliet finally spoke, exasperation evident in her voice. My word! Why didn't we just get a ride to the cottage if it's this far away? Adam suppressed a laugh. Come now, Dr. Bennett, we're almost there. It's not that far, and the exercise is good for blood circulation, he replied with mock cheerfulness. Blood circulation will be the least of our worries if I freeze my hands off, she retorted, frustration bubbling over. Her point was punctuated by a loud sneeze. Just then, a snowshoe hare darted out from the low brush framing the road, scurrying across her path. Startled, Juliet let out a loud yelp, jumped, misstepped, and slipped, landing hard on the snowbank at the edge of the road. The fall was accompanied by a loud crunching sound, and as if to add insult to injury, she sneezed 3 more times in rapid succession. Adam, who had stopped in time to see the snowshoe hare disappear into the brush, watched in dismay as Juliet sprawled awkwardly in the snow. For a moment he hoped she hadn't sprained her ankle and wondered about the sneezing. Dr. Bennett, he called hesitantly, hurrying to her side. She tried to stand but sat back down quickly, looking both undignified and embarrassed. "I don't do so well in the cold," she admitted in a low, defeated tone that tugged at his heart. "I'm sorry," Adam said softly. Juliet glanced up at him, her face a mixture of suspicion and disbelief, wondering why he was apologizing. Then she thought, at least he wasn't laughing. But still, she felt his guilt seemed misplaced. As Adam moved closer, he noticed a small smear of blood in the snow. His stomach tightened with guilt, thinking she must have scraped herself during the fall. "Damn it," he muttered under his breath, regret evident in his expression. Without hesitation, he bent down, scooped her up, and held her securely in his arms. Juliet blinked up at him in surprise, her cheeks red from embarrassment and the cold. "I'm going to stain you with my snot," she said sheepishly. "It's okay," Adam replied, his tone genuine and remorseful. He smiled down at her before continuing the rest of the way, determined to make up for his thoughtless actions. Upon reaching the cottage, Adam hurriedly entered and switched on the lights. Juliet felt a wave of relief wash over her as the warm interior welcomed her. The heat of the room enveloped her like a blanket, a stark contrast to the biting cold outside. Though Adam's arms had already started to warm her up, the cozy atmosphere of the house was a much-needed comfort. As she glanced around, she couldn't help but notice that the cottage was far from the simple utilitarian dwelling one might expect for someone who claimed to be just a guard. The elegance and high standards of the Hawthorne family were evident in every detail, leading her to assume this cottage had been designed to meet their luxurious expectations and not tailored per se for a dwelling for a mere guard. Instead of placing her in the living room, Adam carried her into an adjoining room, which turned out to be the bathroom. Juliet was immediately struck by its refined design. The earthy tones of the tiled walls and floors created a warm, inviting ambience, and she admired how the space seamlessly balanced luxury and practicality. To her left was a spacious glass-enclosed shower, its shelves neatly stocked with essentials, softly illuminated by the bathroom lighting. Beyond the white plantation shutters, the outside world was shrouded in darkness. Her eyes shifted to the whirlpool tub in the corner, framed with rich wooden paneling. Above it hung a serene painting of a riverside scene that added a tranquil touch to the room. Every detail, from the bronze fixtures to the thoughtful layout, radiated understated sophistication. Adam gently placed her on a side couch and met her gaze briefly before stepping back. Removing his jacket, he revealed an undershirt that clung to his well-defined muscles, drawing Juliet's reluctant attention. She found herself unable to look away as he hurried to prepare the bath, dropping a soap bomb into the water before returning to her side. "Can you stand?" he asked, his voice low and deep, the enclosed space making his voice sound somewhat amplified. "Yes. I think so," she replied, blinking after staring at him unabashedly, then cautiously rose to her feet. Adam stepped back slightly to get a better look, and immediately noticed a bloodstain on her left knee. Meeting her gaze, he said, "Looks like you scratched your knee there, Doc. Why not take a soak to warm up and clean up? I'll grab the first aid kit and get a proper meal ready." Juliet nodded, grateful for the suggestion. But as Adam turned to leave, she called out, "Why are you being nice to me all of a sudden?" A guilty smile tugged at his lips. "Why? I was ordered to, ma'am," he quipped. When Juliet arched an eyebrow at him, he winked playfully and headed for the door. Before stepping out, he said over his shoulder, "By the way, I'll need a quick hot shower too, so you've got a 3-minute head start." Juliet stared at the closed door in disbelief and muttered, "Yep, I knew that was short-lived." Letting out a frustrated growl, she began taking off her clothes, grumbling under her breath. As she sank into the bath, the cut on her knee stung, causing her to flinch. She groaned in pain, but the warm, soothing water quickly eased the discomfort. She let out a slow, relieved breath and settled deeper into the water. "Oh boy, this feels good," she murmured to herself, savoring the soothing sensation. Resting her head against the jacuzzi edge, a pleased smile crept onto her face. The apartment they stayed in was fine, but it definitely didn't have a jacuzzi. Compared to this one, it seemed quite shabby, though this one had the unmistakable Hawthorne touch. She began to wonder just what kind of guards Adam and the others were. They didn't seem like the kind of guards they had at the hospital. She guessed they might be some kind of special ops. Her mind lingered on the subject, trying to decipher what kind of guards were attached to the Hawthornes, allowed to live like average CEOs. As her thoughts wandered, her mind shifted to Adam, how he looked without his jacket. She let the memory replay in her head as she shut her eyes, imagining seeing every inch of him. Then the kiss he gave her back at the hospital invaded her thoughts, making her breathing shallow as she remembered how expertly he had rendered her powerless with just a simple kiss. The way he made her feel resurfaced, how she had submitted to him with ardent curiosity, letting him lead and pull her into dangerous territory that made her feel pliant in his arms. Juliet was pretty sure that if Adam were her ex-boyfriend, Dante, she wouldn't have the room to think about waiting until her wedding day to get intimate with a man. She wouldn't give chastity a second thought. The thought made her body feel quite heated now, and she could feel beads of sweat starting to trickle down her temple. Her eyes fluttered open at the sound of a loud knock on the door. Then Adam peeked in, noticing her in the bath and submerged in soapy water. He stepped into the room wearing nothing but a towel wrapped around his waist. "Holy," Juliet muttered, thinking she had only said it in her head until he responded. "Don't get all weird on me now, Dr. Bennett," he said, his voice a blend of teasing and mild chastisement, the tone almost playful and admonishing. It would have been amusing if Juliet weren't so taken aback by the sheer perfection of his physique. He walked into the shower stall, disappearing from her view. Juliet could hear her own breathing, and before she realized it, she had shifted slowly, bringing him back into her sight. Dear God, she thought to herself at the masculine glory in her sight. Adam was quite amused by Dr. Juliet Bennett's mixed signals. She acted like she couldn't stand him, yet her beautiful, intense eyes kept ogling him. "I can feel your eyes burning holes in my skin, Mom," he called out, glancing over his shoulder to catch her reaction. He enjoyed the sight of her quickly sinking lower into the jacuzzi, clearly trying to avoid being caught. He chuckled, shaking his head. Despite her prickly demeanor, Adam felt genuinely bad about getting her injured and planned to apologize, much later when she wasn't likely to bite his head off. The image of her sneezing earlier replayed in his mind, and he couldn't help but think she looked absolutely adorable. The poor thing. He had intended to dart into the bathroom, take a quick hot shower, and then wait for the kitchen staff to bring Juliet's food so he could be ready to let them in. Waiting for her to finish first, however, was out of the question. She was a woman, after all, and he knew that could take forever. Adam quickly scrubbed himself clean, letting the hot water rinse away the soap before switching it off. In his rush to finish, he momentarily forgot he wasn't alone. Striding out of the shower without a second thought, he reached for his towel and froze. There she was, staring at him with flushed cheeks, wide eyes, and an open mouth. "It's not nice to stare, Doctor. Didn't your parents teach you that?" he scolded, a bit irritated with himself for the oversight. "I wasn't staring. You were just there," she defended herself. "I wonder about your perception of reality, Doctor. I suppose our kiss back at the hospital wasn't real either." He jabbed with a smirk as he pulled on his towel robe, tied the knot, and started walking toward her. Her eyes widened in dismay, and she shrank deeper into the water. "Come out of there or you're going to catch a cold for real," he admonished. "I'm not getting up with you standing there," she shot back. "Don't worry, I'm not planning to stick around, unless you want me to," he quipped. She arched an eyebrow as if to say, "Don't push your luck, buddy." Adam chuckled and left. Juliet's eyes followed him out the door, her lips curving into a stifled giggle. Once he was gone, she climbed out of the tub, grabbed a towel, and wrapped it securely around her chest. Directing her gaze to where she'd left her clothes, she found them missing. "Damn it," she muttered under her breath, annoyed. She stepped out of the bathroom cautiously and spotted Adam at the main door, letting in two women who carried trays of food. Juliet quickly retreated, leaning against the bathroom door frame to eavesdrop on the conversation. "Thanks, Mary. You too, Dorothy," she heard Adam say. "You are very welcome," Juliet heard a female voice respond. She didn't catch what was said after that, but whatever it was made Adam chuckle before shutting the door and walking to the coffee table. "You can come out now, Doc," he called out. Juliet slowly appeared in the doorway. "What are you, antisocial now? You could have just come out to say hi," he teased. "I couldn't find my clothes," she replied. "They were wet and a bit bloodied, so I gave them to the staff to clean." "Don't worry, they'll bring them back in record time," he explained, his gaze shifting to her towel-clad figure. His eyes briefly trailed downward and Juliet instinctively crossed her arms over her chest. "Come," he said, his voice low and deep. He walked to another door and Juliet followed him into a walk-in closet. "I'm sure there's something of mine you can wear," he said, reaching up to grab a round-necked shirt. He held it out to her, their eyes meeting and lingering for a moment. "Thanks," she said softly, taking the shirt. "You're welcome," he replied. As she accepted the shirt, their hands brushed briefly and Adam's body grew taut at the light contact. Juliet, however, flinched at the sensation. With one hand clutching the shirt, she struggled to hold onto the towel as it began to slip. She gasped, freezing in place, her face etched with horror as she attempted to cover herself with the shirt and the trailing edge of the towel. When she glanced at Adam, expecting some sort of reaction, she saw that he had already turned his back to her. "You okay, Doc?" he asked, his tone neutral, trying his best to not make her feel threatened. Juliet felt a surprising wave of emotion at his respectful gesture. "Yeah, I'm fine," she replied, a sense of safety settling over her. With an embarrassed smile, she slipped the shirt on and draped the towel over her shoulders. The shirt hung loose, falling all the way to her knees. She chuckled quietly at the sight. "It's okay. You can turn around now," she said. When Adam turned, he took one look at her in his oversized shirt and burst out laughing. Juliet, her cheeks heating, threw the towel at his face. Grabbing the towel with ease, he smirked. "Don't worry, I'm not going to mention how you look like a drowned dwarf in my shirt." "Shut up," Juliet shot back playfully. Adam laughed and walked out of the room, and Juliet smiled to herself before following him. As Juliet stepped into the living room, the warm interior mingled with the mouth-watering aroma of freshly prepared food, filling her senses and prompting her stomach to growl softly. The coffee table had been transformed into a small feast, with an impressive array of dishes carefully arranged. The sight made her pause. Steam rose invitingly from a large tureen of creamy butternut squash soup, its rich orange hue vibrant against the porcelain dish. Beside it sat a basket of freshly baked crusty rolls, their golden brown tops glistening from a light brush of butter. A platter of roasted chicken took center stage. Around it were sides that seemed to warm the room just by their presence. Mashed potatoes whipped to creamy perfection, roasted winter vegetables glistening with olive oil and thyme, and a small bowl of cranberry chutney adding a pop of deep red to the spread. There was also a tray of stuffed mushrooms, their caps filled with a fragrant mixture of breadcrumbs, garlic, and parmesan. In the far corner of the table, she spotted a small pot of mulled wine, the dark liquid simmering gently and spiced with cinnamon sticks, cloves, and slices of orange. Adam looked up from where he was pouring the wine into 2 mugs, his grin widening as he caught her reaction. "Come on now, don't be shy. I did catch a glimpse of your order back at that lounge. Don't go acting coy now. It's a pity you weren't able to eat it," he teased. "That was for me and Dr. Cassandra Fields," Juliet quickly retorted, feeling a bit mortified. "If you say so," Adam replied with a mischievous smirk. Juliet rolled her eyes at him, thinking he was like an annoying sibling, though she was certain the emotions he was stirring inside her were far from brotherly. She sat down, her gaze fixed on the food before glancing up at him hesitantly. "Go on, eat," he encouraged with a warm smile. Juliet nodded and reached for the bowl of soup. As she took a sip, her eyes closed and she let out a soft moan of pleasure. "Oh my God, this tastes divine," she said, savoring the flavor. "Welcome to the world of Ms. Jones's culinary excellence," Adam quipped with a dramatic flair, making her chuckle. "She sounds like an amazing cook," Juliet said, her tone turning conversational. "Oh, she is. And whenever Dr. Hawthorne and Miss Everly decide to pitch in, the result is simply legendary," he added, earning a warm smile from her. Taking a sip of the drink, Adam set the cup down and went to fetch the first aid kit nearby. He reached for her ankle, wrapping his fingers around her slim calf. Juliet's heart skipped a beat as he placed her ankle on his knee and began to clean the scratches on her left knee. She felt the sting of the antiseptic, but her eyes remained on him, watching the gentle way he handled the task. His large, muscular frame was a stark contrast to the tenderness of his touch. "I can see it's not deep. You probably just have too much blood to spill," he joked. She smiled, meeting his gaze as he looked up at her. Juliet felt his fingers gently stroke her skin, the thrill of his touch making her tremble. Her breathing grew ragged. "Thank you," she whispered. "What are you thanking me for exactly, Juliet?" he asked, his voice soft. Slowly he lifted his gaze from her knee and lowered his head, pressing a kiss to the bandaged area, making Juliet's breath hitch before slowly putting her leg back down. Meanwhile, Lewis led Dr. Cassandra Fields to his cottage, already calling the kitchen to have some food brought in for her. "I don't know, let me ask," Lewis said. Cassandra, who had been looking in his direction, met his light brown eyes. Her gaze, warm and intense, seemed to burrow into his, causing him to momentarily forget what he was about to say. The voice coming through the mobile line snapped him back to the present. When he spoke again, his voice sounded deeper than usual. "Do you have any allergies, Doctor?" he asked. "No," Cassandra replied, shaking her head, not breaking eye contact. She could feel the simmering attraction between them, intense and unrelenting. She was certain he felt it too. It was evident in the way their bodies naturally gravitated toward each other, as though an invisible force was pulling them together. Lewis cleared his throat, forcing himself to focus. "No allergies," he said into the phone, then added, "And yes, I'd love to have some hot soup too." Tall. After ending the call, he continued walking alongside Dr. Fields, noting how close they were, their bodies almost touching. He didn't pull away, nor did she. Lewis let out a quiet sigh. He truly didn't want any entanglement, but the pull of the cosmic energy between them was impossible to ignore, no matter how hard he tried. The temptation to revel in the warmth of her closeness was intense, and he wasn't sure how to handle it. Cassandra observed that the silence between them didn't feel awkward. She had never experienced anything quite like it. It was as if they were two halves of a whole coming together. It was both unsettling and fascinating. "I don't think you need to worry about those guys back at the bar like Jake said," Lewis began, then hesitated, realizing she might not know who Jake was. "Jake's the big guy with blue eyes who mentioned he'd find alternative living arrangements for you and Dr. Bennett," he explained. Cassandra nodded with a pensive gaze, soaking in the information. "He's not one to speak out of turn. He'll find a solution. There's no need to be afraid, all right?" Lewis reassured her. "Thank you," Cassandra said, offering him a warm smile. Lewis thought she looked stunning as her face brightened with a smile, her eyes glowing with warmth. She struck him as someone who trusted too easily, and the thought of others taking advantage of that unsettled him. "She's not yours to protect, damn it," he thought, his jaw tightening. Soon they arrived at the cottage. As Cassandra stepped inside, her face lit up with a smile at the luxurious setting. She wasn't surprised at all. After all, this was Dr. Everly's home. By a familiar voice that had terrified him for months when he was still attending school at Sylvan Ridge. He rubbed his eyes, thinking he was probably dreaming, but the loud honking continued. He got out of bed, slipped on his bunny slippers, and hurried toward the door. "Where are you going?" Owen, who had also been woken by the noise, asked before Liam could leave the room. "You can hear that too, right?" "I want to see what's going on," Liam replied with exasperation as he glanced over his shoulder. Owen quickly put on his slippers and followed Liam. The two hurried down the hallway and towards the stairs. When they reached the top landing, they saw Tristan peeking out from the living room glass wall. "What's going on?" Liam called out as he hurried down the stairs with Owen. Tristan flinched at the sound of Liam's voice. His dad had told him to go back to sleep when they were woken by the loud car horn and a voice that sounded like his mom's, cursing his dad and demanding to see Tristan. Tristan sighed in relief upon seeing it was just Liam and Owen. "It's my mom. She wants to see me, I guess," Tristan said, his voice tinged with dejection. Liam and Owen climbed onto the chair to peer outside. They could clearly see the familiar woman arguing with one of their uncles and Tristan's dad. The woman was hitting Tristan's dad, but he wasn't doing much to stop her. "I know she's your mom, but I don't think she's a good person," Owen said. "Do you want to see her, though?" he added with interest. Tristan shrugged, unsure of what he wanted. He loved his mom but hated it when she picked on his dad. But she was still his mom. "Do you think if I see her she'll stop fighting him?" Tristan asked with an earnest gaze. Liam shrugged. I don't know. Maybe we should get help for your dad, he suggested. I guess. I wouldn't want your uncles to take care of her, though, Tristan said, air quoting. Liam and Owen exchanged puzzled looks. You don't want help for your dad? Owen asked, just to be sure. Maybe we should just get your mom, Tristan said. Owen furrowed his brow and exchanged a glance with Liam. While they wanted to help Tristan's dad, they didn't want to unleash the woman on their mom. They knew she was vile and didn't like them, or their mum. They remembered how the woman had made their mums' lives hell when they were at Sylvan Ridge until their dad rescued them. I think we had better get our dad, Liam suggested. Owen nodded and Tristan let out a sigh of resignation. But we can't tell him to take care of her, Tristan said, air quoting again. Liam thought maybe he was having some kind of episode. Let's just go get Dad, Owen said, and the three headed for the staircase. But just as they reached the middle of it, Ethan marched out of his room, wearing nothing but his pajamas, muttering curses under his breath until he saw the kids. Uncle Ethan, the twins said. Ah, I bet that witch woke you all up too. Don't worry, your Uncle Ethan will make her stop right away, he said, hurrying past the boys. The boys exchanged excited grins and rushed after him. Arya peered out of the tent's opening, which framed the horizon like a perfectly cropped photograph. Okay, I must admit this is pretty impressive, Arya said, craning her neck to look up at Nathaniel as he slid behind her, wrapping his arms around her. Nathaniel smiled and pressed a lingering kiss to her soft, full lips. Don't give in so easily, he murmured, his voice deep and teasing. At least let me give you your treats first. His smouldering gaze made it clear that he had brought her there for far more than just watching the sunrise. Arya tilted her face up and Nathaniel kissed her again. As if on cue, when he pulled back, he gestured toward the horizon. She turned to look, and there it was, the first rays of sunlight piercing the sky, painting it with shades of gold and pink. Nathaniel pulled her snugly into his arms, wrapping them around her chest, his long legs framing her outstretched ones. The warmth from the tent's heater, combined with the intimacy of his hold, made Arya feel enveloped in a cocoon of comfort and love. Worth it? Nathaniel whispered into her ear, his voice low and enticing, making her pulse quicken. Arya smiled, her eyelids fluttering shut briefly. Absolutely, she murmured. Soft laughter drifted from Andrew's and Anita's tent, adding a wholesome touch to the serene atmosphere. Turning slightly in Nathaniel's arms, Arya reached up to cup his jaw. She gently pulled his face down and kissed him. Nathaniel felt an intense surge of desire flood through him as he kissed her back. His hands found the waistband of her jeans, and she mirrored his actions, their kisses growing fervent and hurried. The two surrendered to the inferno of passion that always seemed to ignite at the simplest touch. True to Nathaniel's words, he did let her sleep, but in his arms. Arya wasn't sure how long they had slept, only that Andrew's subtle call to Nathaniel woke them up sometime later. Back at the craft, Arya couldn't help but chuckle when she noticed Anita was still sound asleep. The way the blankets were tightly wrapped around her from chin to toes made it clear that Andrew had carried her back into the helicopter. Nathaniel moved to co-pilot with Andrew, and soon enough, they returned to Sylvan Ridge. As the craft descended, Arya noticed a commotion below. Spotting Justin and Ethan, she quickly recognized the woman with them as Pamela. A sigh escaped her lips. She knew trouble was brewing. Just like Arya, Nathaniel had seen Pamela Anderson too. Andrew had already informed him she was there. Unknown to Arya, that was the reason Andrew had called him out of the tent. Earlier, Ash had contacted Andrew, asking what to do about the woman and her police escorts. She claimed Justin had kidnapped her son, and she was there to retrieve her son and have Justin arrested. Andrew instructed Ash to stall her until they returned, and to inform Tom in case he could come to speak with the deputies. Nathaniel had immediately told Andrew they needed to head back, far earlier than planned. Judging by the scene below, it was clear the woman hadn't just disrupted his day, but had also managed to unsettle his guests. When Andrew landed the craft, Nathaniel left his seat, giving Andrew a grateful pat on the shoulder before joining Arya. His eyes met her searching gaze, and he could tell she knew he was furious. "Nathan," she called, her soft, low voice lined with a quiet plea. "It's okay, babe," Nathaniel replied simply, though he doubted she believed he was as calm as he sounded. Anita sat up, rubbing sleep from her eyes as she glanced between Arya and Nathaniel just as Andrew left the cockpit. "What happened?" she asked hesitantly. "Pam is here," Arya replied with a grimace. "Pamela Anderson?" Anita asked, raising an eyebrow, her eyes widening in disbelief. Arya nodded. Nathaniel and Andrew headed to the exit door, pulled it open, and jumped down. They motioned for the ladies to join them. Nathaniel helped Arya down while Andrew carried Anita. "Both of you need to head inside," Nathaniel said, planting a quick kiss on Arya's lips. "I'll be with you in a minute," he added in almost a whisper before walking away with Andrew. "But we could help," Anita called after them. Arya didn't bother, unsurprised when Andrew replied, "No thanks, honey. Please, you and Dr. Hawthorne should go inside where it's warm." Anita growled, but Arya took her hand and gently guided her toward the house. "There's no point. Nathan had that look of determined resolve when his mind was set. For Pamela's sake, I hope she stays polite," Arya remarked. Anita looked at her as if she'd just asked for a miracle. Arya burst out laughing. "You have some uncanny expectations, my friend," Anita quipped, making Arya laugh harder. Meanwhile, Nathaniel and Andrew were halfway to where Pamela was yelling at Justin and cursing Ethan when they encountered Tom, accompanied by Miss Bella and Anton, walking down the pathway from the back cottage. "Good morning, boss," Anton called. "Morning, Nate," Tom greeted with a groan and a smile. "Good morning, Nate," Miss Bella added warmly. Nathaniel stopped walking, returning their greetings as they approached. "Jake said not to expect you back yet," Tom remarked. "I heard we had quite a situation here," Nathaniel replied. Tom and Miss Bella sighed. "Tell me about it," Tom said. "She woke the entire Sylvan Ridge with her constant car horn blaring," Miss Bella said irritably. "She did what?" Andrew asked, shocked. Nathaniel's jaw tightened as he glanced toward the main house. Through the glass-paneled walls, he could see Liam, Owen, and Tristan. His irritation deepened as he realized Pamela must have woken the twins and the triplets. The precious time he had hoped to use as leverage was now gone, and the triplets were undoubtedly up and wanting their mother. Nathaniel's anger simmered. Tom noticed how unusually quiet Nathaniel had become, knowing very well what that meant. "Let me handle this," Tom said, patting Nathaniel on the shoulder and giving Bella a smile as he drew back from her before walking alone towards the scene. Nathaniel and Andrew followed closely. Andrew quietly took in Pamela Anderson's appearance. She wore a sleek red coat with a bold double-breasted design. The black buttons, arranged in a double-breasted style, added structure and a striking contrast to the vibrant red fabric. She paired the coat with form-fitting denim jeans that accentuated her long, slender legs, along with knee-high black boots. A knitted scarf wrapped around her neck, and black leather gloves covered her hands, giving her the look of a suburban socialite. Considering her past, Andrew figured she must loathe the new role Justin was about to assign her in such a small community, where she had long reigned supreme in her bitchiness. "Pardon me, Miss Graham," Tom began, his tone mellowed and a tad non-committal. "I may not be fully versed in Alaska's laws, but I can assure you that, where we come from, your actions would qualify as harassment, public nuisance, trespassing, unlawful accusation, and potentially defamation or abuse of process. This is especially true if there is evidence to prove that you were present and gave your consent when your husband decided to bring your son to New York for critical intervention treatment for his illness. Your allegations are serious, and if Mr. Justin or Nathaniel Hawthorne, who is hosting him and your son, chose to pursue legal action, I have no doubt that at least 2 of these charges would hold up in court." As Tom approached the group, his words brought the commotion to an abrupt halt. He fixed his gaze on Pamela, who was now glaring at him. "And I hope your escorts have a valid arrest warrant for Mr. Graham that meets probable cause standards. Otherwise, this situation could escalate into a case of unlawful detention or abuse of authority for both you and them," Tom stated, his tone resolute. The deputies shifted uncomfortably, exchanging uneasy glances. Ethan frowned, realizing he hadn't known that Pamela intended for the crooked deputies to arrest Justin. "Are you threatening me?" Pamela snapped. Nathaniel stepped forward, shaking Ethan's hand before addressing the group. Nah, we don't make threats, we make promises. And I disagree with Tom. I'm pretty sure all the charges will stick, Nathaniel said, amending Tom's statement as he slipped his hands into the pockets of his trousers. Pamela's lashes fluttered, and her brows furrowed with worry as she glanced nervously toward the deputies. Ethan noticed the deputies exchanging uneasy looks with each other, then glancing at Tom and Nathaniel. When Justin opened his mouth to speak, Ethan cut him off. "Shut up, Justin," Ethan said sharply. Tom straightened his posture, testing whether the lingering pain in his body would still flare up. Although he could feel it faintly, it was beginning to dull. "I'm going to advise you to get yourself a lawyer," Tom said, directing his words at Pamela. "I'm not going to wait weeks for a court proceeding to get custody of my son. He's my son too, Justin," Pamela cried out in frustrated anger. "I was going to bring him home. Weren't you listening?" Justin replied, equally frustrated. "He was going to bring him home, but now he won't be doing that," Nathaniel interjected firmly. "What? With all due respect, Mr. Hawthorne, this is none of your business. This is between me and Justin. Who are you to decide?" Pamela started, but Nathaniel cut her off. "I'm the husband of the woman who saved your son's life. I'm the man who has accommodated your son and husband for days. And I'm the man whose property you're trespassing on, causing a public nuisance. You made it my business the moment you disrupted my family's peace with your nonsense," Nathaniel retorted, his tone sharp and authoritative. "You should leave, Miss Graham," Tom added calmly but firmly. Pamela's lips trembled, her face crumbling as she took in the resolute expressions of those standing against her. Ethan hoped she still had a shred of self-preservation as her gaze moved over the group. Finally, she stepped back, then took another step before turning toward her car. The deputies cast Justin a cold glance before silently following Pamela back to the vehicle. Justin let out a sigh of relief as the deputies got into Pamela's car. He honestly didn't know what to do next. His initial plan was to wait for Arya to give Tristan a thorough medical check and assure him that he was fine before taking the boy home to Pamela. He had hoped to at least have a conversation with her about co-parenting before finalizing the divorce. He hadn't intended to prevent her from seeing Tristan, although he was somewhat concerned about her overall influence on their son. He had noticed significant changes in Tristan's behavior since spending time with Arya's boys, and he liked the positive growth he was seeing. His concern was that if he returned to work and left Tristan in Pamela's care, she might undo that progress and mold him back into the unhappy, aggressive child he used to be. While Justin admitted his own shortcomings in not being there well enough to assist with parenting, he was determined to make positive changes now. But after Pamela's latest actions, he felt uncertain about his next steps. Where would they go once he left with Tristan? Returning to their house no longer seemed safe, not when Pamela was already concocting stories to remove him from the picture. Justin blinked, pulling himself out of his spiraling thoughts. Looking around, he noticed the others had already begun heading back toward the house. Nearby, Ash, Andrew, Stephen, and Anton stood in a small group, likely discussing Pamela's disruptive intrusion. Justin hoped Tristan hadn't witnessed the chaos. With the intent of following Ethan's group, he prepared to thank Mr. Hill, Nathaniel, and Ethan for their intervention when a loud curse rang out through the crisp air. "What in all the seven hells?" Andrew swore loudly. Justin whipped his head around just in time to see Pamela's jeep speeding directly toward him. "Get out of the way!" Andrew yelled, his voice laced with horror. Justin's heart skipped a beat as he froze, staring at the oncoming vehicle. Andrew pulled out his gun, prepared for the possibility that he might have to shoot Pamela to stop her. But before he could act, he noticed that Anton, Stephen, and Ash were already on the move. Anton sprinted toward the jeep, firing at the front tires as he ran. Stephen focused on Justin, who stood frozen on the pathway, directly in the vehicle's path. Justin was paralyzed, as if he'd turned to stone from the shock of Pamela trying to hit him with a car. Meanwhile, Ash moved with superhuman speed and agility, captivating in his fluidity. He lunged toward the jeep, grabbing the top rail on the driver's side. With two powerful punches, each punctuated by his grunts, he shattered the side window. Glass shards exploded inward and outward, scattering everywhere. Pamela let out a piercing, uncanny scream, a mix of rage, defiance, anguish, and raw, malicious intent. Ash seized her by the front of her jacket, yanking her upward with such force that her feet couldn't reach the pedals. This gave the deputy sitting beside her, who had been pleading for her to stop, the chance to grab the wheel. The deputy swerved the car sharply, steering it off the pathway and into a snowbank. The jeep wobbled, skidded, and finally came to a stop. Half buried in the snow, Pamela screamed and lashed out, biting and scratching at Ash. Ignoring her attempts, he let out a guttural growl and yanked her through the window, dropping her hard onto the snow-covered ground. She cried out in pain as she landed, but Ash barely registered it. He glanced at the bite and scratch marks on his arm before taking a menacing step towards her. His eyes burned a near crimson hue, and his snarling expression revealed sharp, bared teeth. "Beast!" Pamela screamed, her voice trembling with fear. "Beast!" Ash repeated, his voice low and furious, his teeth clenched. "You dare!" he roared, his fury echoing through the icy air. Bella and Dawn, who had joined Anita and Arya on the front porch, watched in awe at the terror Pamela had nearly caused. As Pamela made a move to throw something at Ash, Arya growled, "Hell no!" and sprang into action. Anita followed close behind. Nearby, Nathaniel, Ethan, and Tom, who had been the closest to the scene, paused to watch the horrifying events unfold. Ethan cursed, his voice tinged with disbelief. "I've always said this girl was batshit crazy. She actually tried to kill him with everyone watching?" Nathaniel's jaw clenched as he darted his gaze toward the glass wall where he had earlier seen the boys. His simmering anger grew as he realized Liam, Owen, and Tristan were still there, witnessing everything. "Shit," he muttered under his breath. "Well, this is in Graham's favor," Tom remarked dryly. She just handed him the win on a silver platter. "How thoughtful," he mocked. Arya and Anita hurried past Nathaniel and his group, Dawn trailing behind them. Neither Arya nor Anita even glanced in Nathaniel's direction as they jogged toward Ash and Pamela. "Arya?" Nathaniel called out, but she didn't respond. Her focus was singular, reaching Pamela. "She's going to smack her silly, and I'm just happy to live long enough to witness this historic event," Ethan said with glee. "The kids are watching, though," Nathaniel said with a sigh, prompting Ethan and Tom to look in their direction. Nathaniel spotted a guard standing near the house and called out, "Tyrone?" "Yes, boss," the man responded. "Get the kids out of there," Nathaniel ordered, his tone loud and authoritative. Bella, noticing the children as well, gasped. "Oh, Lord," she exclaimed, hurrying inside ahead of the guard to reach the kids. Arya and Anita reached Ash just as one of the deputies hurried to check on Stephen and Justin, who were dusting snow off themselves as they got up from the ground. "Are you okay?" the deputy asked urgently. The other deputy, finally free from the jeep, rushed toward Pamela. Arya and Anita got to Ash and Pamela first. "Stay away from me, you filthy animal," Pamela spat at Ash, her voice trembling. Arya scooped up a pile of snow, quickly molding it into a ball as she approached. Anita followed suit, and as if on cue, the two began pelting Pamela with the snowballs, aiming to disarm and distract her. "Hey, what the hell?" Pamela shrieked as one snowball hit her square in the face and another struck her chest. When the two women were close enough, Arya addressed Ash. "We'll take it from here." Ash stepped back just as Arya lunged at Pamela. She and Anita pulled her upright, and Arya delivered a hard backhand slap. Pamela growled and tried to retaliate, but Anita yanked her back by her hair. "Oh, you think we're playing with you, you skinny psychopathic bitch?" Anita sneered, punctuating her words with another sharp slap. "Ah, let go of me, you savages!" Pamela cried out. Then in desperation she screamed, "Help!" Ash fought to stifle a laugh. Dawn arrived and seamlessly joined the circle around Pamela. When Pamela attempted to flee in Dawn's direction, Dawn, feigning nonchalance, pretended to whistle as she casually swept Pamela's feet out from under her. Pamela went tumbling face first into the snow. A few meters away, Anton watched the scene unfold, unable to hold back his laughter. His broad chest heaved, a mixture of relief and disbelief at the chaos they had just managed to avert. Anita grabbed Pamela by the ankle and dragged her back, while Arya grabbed a handful of her hair, forcing her face up, and delivered another slap. "That's for trying to kill Justin," Arya said coldly. slapping her again. "And that's for calling Ash a beast when you've got a rotten, decayed soul." She snarled. "Help!" Pamela cried again, tears mixing with her rage and humiliation. "Shut up!" Anita barked. Nathaniel, now seeing that the kids had been ushered away from the glass wall, shifted his attention back to Arya and the others. He briefly lowered his gaze, trying to suppress a laugh. When he looked up again, he couldn't help but chuckle as Ethan cheered, "That's my Arya. Kick her freaking ass." "Will you stop encouraging her?" Nathaniel asked, shooting Ethan a disapproving glance. Ethan threw him a withering look and retorted, "This ain't got nothing to do with you, city boy." Tom burst into laughter, unable to contain himself. Andrew couldn't help but feel a surge of pride at how things had unfolded, but his anxiety spiked as he worried Anita might get kicked in the stomach. He hurried over to the scene. By the time he arrived, Anita was dragging Pamela through the snow, holding her down while Dr. Hawthorne smacked her around. "Ash, a little help, please," Andrew called out as he approached Anita. Ash groaned in protest. "Maybe we should, wait a bit," he said, grinning. "Get your ass over here," Andrew said with mock seriousness, making Ash chuckle. Andrew lunged forward, grabbing Anita from behind and lifting her off Pamela as she kicked and screamed in protest. Ash and Dawn stepped in, restraining Pamela and pulling her away from Dr. Hawthorne. Arya stood back, breathing heavily, her chest rising and falling as she watched. Ash pulled Pamela's hands behind her back and secured her wrists with a zip tie. "You skunking bitches, you'll pay for this, all of you!" Pamela spat, blood trickling from the corners of her mouth and nose. Her face was red from all the slaps she'd endured. Then she craned her neck and spit at Ash. Before Ash could react, Arya lunged forward and jabbed Pamela in the throat. Using a move she'd once seen Nathaniel practice on a gym dummy, Pamela slumped instantly, knocked out cold. "Woohoo!" Anita cheered. "I can't hear you talking anymore, Trick." She laughed, her tone triumphant. Andrew smacked her playfully on the rear, causing her to dissolve into giggles. "Did I kill her?" Arya asked Ash, her voice hesitant. The big man chuckled, shaking his head. "No, Doc, you just knocked her out," he reassured her. "That wasn't necessary, though," said the closest deputy, frowning slightly. Arya turned on him, taking a threatening step forward. "What did you say?" She yelled. "She was going to kill Justin." "Did you see what everyone else saw, Richard?" The deputy raised his hands in surrender. Okay, he said, quickly backing off. Ethan, noticing the deputy talking to Arya, frowned and said, "Oh, he'd better not be harassing her," before breaking into a jog to join her. "You stand back from her right now," he yelled as he approached the two, his voice loud and menacing. Nathaniel, who had followed Ethan, stepped in, pulling Arya back and wrapping his arms around her chest in an attempt to calm her. "That's okay now, my little wildcat," he murmured softly, his voice calm and soothing. Meanwhile, Justin was still reeling from the shock of Pamela's actions. Bending over with his head in his hands, he muttered to himself, "She was going to hit me with a car. Oh my God, she was going to hit me with the car." The more he repeated it, the more the horrifying reality seemed to sink in, solidifying in his mind. His disbelief gradually morphed into anger. "Did you see that? She was going to hit me with the damn car I paid for," he exclaimed, his voice rising. The deputy, trying to reason with him, said, "She just lost control for a moment, Justin. She's overwhelmed. You've got to understand. She's losing her husband and her child all at once. Women react differently to loss." "Are you defending her?" Justin yelled, his anger flaring. "She tried to kill me. You think that's justifiable? I wasn't even thinking about keeping her away from our son. Clearly, I should have. She's crazy. I'm the idiot who refused to accept it. I'm the fool who still thought she was redeemable. She tried to kill me." Ethan, now standing beside Nathaniel and Arya, nudged her lightly and said, "Looks like someone finally grew a pair." Arya sighed deeply, her heart heavy with sympathy for Justin. Inside the house, Bella, worried the children may have seen too much, quickened her pace and found them standing by the glass wall, their faces pale and their mouths agape. "Oh, heavens," she murmured in dismay and called to them, making them turn away from the wall to look at her. "Boys, come now. Let's get ready for breakfast," she urged gently. The three slowly turned and shuffled towards the couch, their movements sluggish. Liam looked up at his Grandma Bella, his wide eyes locking onto hers. "Did you see that?" he asked, his voice a mix of awe and disbelief. The car was coming at full speed, and Uncle Ash jumped onto it like a monkey. Owen exclaimed, his excitement overflowing as he and Liam eagerly retold the scene they'd witnessed. "He smashed the glass with his fist and stopped the car. Uncle Stephen grabbed Tristan's dad and jumped out of the way," Liam added, springing onto the couch to reenact the scene. "Then Uncle Anton rushed in like this," Owen continued, mimicking how his uncle had approached the car with his gun drawn. "I want to be like Uncle Ash when I grow up," he declared, bouncing on the couch with unrestrained enthusiasm. "Nuh-uh, I want to be like Uncle Jake. He could have stopped the car with his bare hands. Ah!" he demonstrated. Tyrone chuckled, scooping Owen and Liam into his arms, their laughter ringing out as he carried them towards the kitchen, following Grandma Bella. Owen, noticing Tristan wasn't chiming in, glanced back and saw him trudging silently behind them. "Tristan?" Liam called, turning his head as well. Yeah. Everyone saw my mum try to hit my dad with her car, Liam," Tristan muttered, his face downcast and his voice heavy with emotion. Tyrone stopped walking, and so did Grandma Bella. Liam and Owen wiggled out of Tyrone's arms, and he gently set them down. The two boys walked back to join Tristan, falling into step beside him. "I'm sure she would have stopped. She wouldn't have really hit him, right, Grandma Bella?" Owen asked, his earnest gaze fixed on her, searching for reassurance. Liam and Tristan turned their attention to Grandma Bella as well. Bella's heart ached at the hope flickering in Tristan's expression, his fragile belief balancing on the edge of despair. Bella smiled at the three, bending down to look into their eyes. She said, "When people get really angry, they can do things they might regret. Later, in that moment, they don't realize what they're doing, and the people around them don't know what to expect either. That's why, if you're ever in a situation like that, it's better to think about the worst that could happen so you can keep yourself safe." What you saw was your uncles working together to make sure nothing bad happened. Whether Tristan's mum would have done something or not isn't what we should worry about. What matters is that Tristan's dad is okay. His mum didn't get hurt, and she was stopped from doing anything she'd feel bad about later. So, to answer your question about whether she would have hit Tristan's dad, it's better that we don't find out. She paused, giving the three a searching look. Liam and Owen nodded, their eyes thoughtful. "What did you learn from what I just said?" Bella asked with a warm smile. "Getting mad can be bad, and you should stay safe," Liam said. "Let grown-ups handle the hard stuff, and don't try to guess what's going to happen," Owen added. Tristan glanced at Liam and Owen, nodding before adding, "People can do stuff you don't expect, so it's better to be careful." Bella nodded and clapped her hands. "Smart answers. Now let's go get ready for breakfast," she said, playfully booping their noses, making them giggle before turning to walk away. Hearing the children shift to a lighter conversation, Tyrone muttered to Bella, "Nicely done, Mom." Bella grinned in response. Outside, Justin demanded that Pamela be arrested by unbiased police officers. The deputies took offense, but he didn't care. Andrew made a call to the police chief to report the situation. The chief promised to come personally. Meanwhile, Ash lifted the unconscious woman and placed her in the back seat of her Jeep. Justin then walked over to where Nathaniel was standing with Aria, Tom Hill, Dawn, Anita, and Ethan. Anton had also joined them, along with Stephen. "I am so sorry," Justin said, his face etched with embarrassment. "It's okay, Graham. I'm just glad you didn't end up as a sandwich on my porch with my boys and your son watching," Nathaniel replied. Justin's eyes widened as Aria and Anita turned toward him with audible gasps. Nathaniel nodded in confirmation and pointed toward the house, gesturing at the glass wall. "They were there watching," he added. The women groaned and Justin let out a string of expletives. "You're telling me the children saw us fighting?" Aria exclaimed, covering her face with both hands. Nathaniel chuckled. "Let's hope not. I think Bella and Tyrone got to them before anything started." Aria, Anita, and Dawn let out a collective sigh of relief. "How do I explain this?" Justin muttered, running a hand down his face. "How do I explain to a 7-year-old why his mother tried to kill his dad over pointless nonsense?" His voice sounded pained, as though the situation physically hurt him. Ethan wanted to respond, to remind Justin that he had chosen to marry and have children with a lunatic, but he figured the poor guy was already going through enough. The fact that he even considered holding back and being cautious about his words made Ethan frown. The fuck is happening to me? He thought in annoyance. I'm sure there's a way to shield Tristan from this, Dawn said gently. I wouldn't recommend lying to him, Nathaniel interjected. You'll need him to understand the situation, so he's better equipped to protect himself from her if the need arises. Arya looked at Nathaniel with a thoughtful gaze, her brows furrowing at the weight of his words. The depth of his comment struck her. Pamela was Tristan's mother, and once everything settled, she might still gain at least shared access to him. What if Pamela planned to hurt Tristan just to get back at Justin, knowing how much he loved his son? The thought filled Arya with deep sadness. Tristan was about to be thrown into the chaos of adult conflicts with no defense of his own. She glanced at Tom, silently seeking his guidance. He met her eyes and nodded with a subtle, reassuring smile. We could use what happened here to have her mentally evaluated and thoroughly investigated for past actions, Tom suggested. That way, if she does get visitation rights, it would be under strict supervision. Justin nodded slowly, a thoughtful frown crossing his face. Thank you, I think I may need to do that for Tristan's sake, he said quietly. You'll also need to watch your back, Tom warned. She strikes me as someone who holds grudges, to a dangerous level. I've met a few like her before, he added with a sigh. Nathaniel reached out and patted Tom on the back. Let's go inside, he said, gesturing for the others to follow. Early on, Lewis woke up, unsure of how to feel. The emotional roller coaster of the past few hours has been both unsettling and surreal. He had gone from committing to a life free of female drama to intervening in one, finding himself unexpectedly entangled with a particular woman. And now, here he was, tangled in the sheets, naked, with her. He felt utterly confused about what he should feel or do next. His first instinct was to regain his equilibrium by distancing himself from the situation and thinking it through. He wasn't the kind of man who indulged in one-night stands, let alone slept with strangers, and without protection, no less. Looking back, he admitted he'd been too vulnerable at the time to think straight, but the idea that Cassandra might be accustomed to this kind of situation, waking up in a stranger's bed, bothered him. Was she really so attracted to him, or was this just something casual for her? After all, they had only been around each other for a brief period. In his opinion, that was far too short a time to develop any meaningful emotions. This left him with only one conclusion. What happened between them was casual, meaningless sex. That meant he shouldn't feel anything about it. He just needed to get up, clean up, take Cassandra back to her apartment, and ensure she was safe. Then he could return to his original mission, protecting the Hawthornes. Given how he'd almost shot her in the middle of the night, he figured she would be quite mental to even consider seeing him again. As for her and Dr. Juliet Bennett's security concerns, he was confident Jake would handle that. It wasn't his responsibility to worry about them, right? He tried to gently untangle himself from her, but it wasn't easy given their intimate position, with her lying atop him. The soft brush of her skin against his made him clench his jaw, suppressing a groan. Cassandra's eyes fluttered open at the sensation of his body moving beneath hers. Tilting her head up, she met his gaze, her expression probing as if she was searching his thoughts. Their shared closeness amplifying the moment. I was trying to get up, Lewis said, his deep voice breaking the quiet. Cassandra nodded and shifted, rolling over onto the bed. As she moved, Lewis sat up, his eyes instinctively drawn to her bare back. His gaze traveled down her body, landing on the bruises on her thighs, wrists, and neck. Concern knitted his brows as he reached for her shoulder, gently turning her to face him. Cassandra blinked in surprise as he pulled back the covers, exposing more bruises along her chest and stomach. His expression darkened with worry. "Did I do that?" he asked, his voice rough with concern. "Not really," she said quietly, glancing down as if embarrassed. "I have a genetic platelet disorder. I bruise easily," she explained, her tone barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry," Lewis said, his voice deeper than usual. "I'm not," Cassandra replied, offering a small, shy smile. I've never felt the way I felt in your arms." "Stop," Lewis interrupted, his voice firm as he leaned in closer. "Are you seriously about to tell me how you felt with other men? To my face, woman?" Cassandra's brows furrowed, confusion flickering across her features. "No," she quickly clarified. "I'm just saying what we shared is special to me." Her voice was soft and hesitant, her eyes gleaming with sincerity. "Well, I don't want to hear about you being with other men, if it's all the same to you, Dr. Fields," he snapped, his words carrying a hard edge. Cassandra gave a small nod, her gaze unwavering as she held his. Lewis felt a knot of embarrassment tighten in his chest. The outburst had come so quickly he hadn't had time to rein it in. The idea of her sharing an intimate connection with someone else gnawed at him, eclipsing the meaning behind her confession of how much their time together had meant. "You should get ready so I can take you back to your apartment, then to the hospital," he said, his tone sharper than he intended. Cassandra nodded but didn't move. She also didn't bother to cover herself after Lewis had pulled the drapes away to examine her bruises. As he started to pull back, his eyes involuntarily drifted over her body again. Now, understanding the source of her bruises, his thoughts shifted from concern to something else entirely. How utterly beautiful she was, her pale skin almost luminous. He briefly wondered if her pallor was linked to her condition. Cassandra, on the other hand, had braced herself for a different reaction. Given how her last two relationships ended, she had anticipated recoil or disgust after disclosing her medical condition. But none of that came. Instead, Lewis's gaze reflected a mixture of anger and concern, tempered with something deeper. An unmistakable intensity that seemed to caress her like a physical touch. There was no trace of rejection, just a raw, unfiltered sense of male possessiveness. Her chest rose and fell as she struggled with the vulnerability his gaze stirred in her. She couldn't explain why, but it made her feel exposed in a way that was both thrilling and disarming. Her body responded instinctively, her legs parting slightly, as if they had a will of their own. When his eyes finally returned to meet hers, she was breathing through parted lips, her face flushed with desire. Lewis felt a surge of something primal rising within him, overtaking all rational thought. Without hesitation, he reached forward, grabbing her thigh and pulling her close. Cassandra shut her eyes, her head falling back as she arched her back and moaned his name softly. Lewis. A few meters away at Adam's cottage, his night had been a bit more restful than Lewis's. After ensuring Juliet was fed and her wound properly tended to, he had fashioned a makeshift bed for himself near the fire using a few duvet covers. When Juliet finished her meal, she attempted to clear the dishes, but he stopped her, gathering the plates himself and packing them into a wicker basket. He carried them outside and set them on the porch, just as they used to do back home. Locking the door behind him, he returned to the fire and arranged his makeshift bed, all while trying to suppress the simmering desire to finish what he had started with the beautiful doctor. He knew very well that she wanted him too, but he held back for several reasons. Chief among them was the reminder that she had come here seeking sanctuary. The last thing he wanted was to prove that she couldn't feel safe with him. "Good night, Dr. Bennett," Adam said, his deep voice mellow as he settled onto the blankets. "Good," Juliet started, her voice faltering. She paused to clear her throat and tried again. "Good night, Adam." Her tone was soft and almost inaudible. Juliet lay down on the bed, her eyes naturally drawn to Adam as he rested near the fire. She watched him shift from lying on his side to his back, the blanket slipping slightly and exposing his well-defined chest. The firelight highlighted the twin bulges of his pectorals, distinct under the orange glow. Unable to resist, Juliet sat up slightly, craning her neck to take in the view. Her gaze traveled from his chest down to his taut, sculpted abs. He looked as though he had been carved to perfection, and the memory of what she had glimpsed beneath the covers earlier flooded her mind. Her breathing quickened as her eyes lingered on the evident bulge beneath the blanket, completely forgetting that he might sit up and catch her in the act. She didn't know how long she had tortured herself. watching him and imagining pressing kisses to his chest, worshipping his body with her lips. It wasn't something she had experience in, but it wasn't something she would readily admit either. Eventually, exhaustion won and she drifted to sleep. Juliet had an internal alarm clock that always woke her at exactly 4 a.m., no matter the day or how late she had gone to bed. Like clockwork, her eyes fluttered open, and she sighed as consciousness returned. Remembering where she was, she sat up and glanced toward the fire, only to find Adam gone. His makeshift bed had been neatly folded and placed on the couch at the foot of the bed. She paused, straining her ears to pick up any sound that might indicate whether he was still in the cottage, but she couldn't hear any sound. Of course, he's an early riser. He's a military guy, she mumbled to herself, deciding to get up, shower, and possibly find something decent to wear from his closet before he returned. Rubbing the back of her hand against her eyes, she made her way to the bathroom. Opening the door and stepping inside, she froze. There, standing in front of her, was Adam, mid-motion as he pulled on his boxers. Juliet gasped, her eyes widening at the sight of Adam naked once again. "You've got to be freaking kidding me!" Adam cursed loudly, fumbling to pull on his boxers. In his haste, he lost his balance and landed unceremoniously on his backside. Juliet stared for a moment, caught between disbelief and amusement, before bursting into laughter. Adam let out a guttural growl of frustration, which only made her laughter grow louder. She turned and darted out of the bathroom before he could say anything further. Adam sat there, irritation and embarrassment bubbling to the surface. He finally managed to get his boxers on and stood bare-chested, storming out of the bathroom. His frustration had already been simmering. He had gone to bed the night before with every muscle in his body aching for release. And now this. He had hoped to get dressed quietly and wake her up so they could prepare to drop her and Dr. Fields off at the hospital. Instead, he was left dealing with this madness again. "You did that on purpose, didn't you?" Adam growled as he stopped at the bathroom door, his eyes locking onto Juliet across the room. She stood near the fire, wringing her hands nervously. Her silhouette was visible through his oversized shirt, the soft light accentuating every curve. His anger began to ebb, replaced by a hunger so intense that he clenched his fists to keep himself in check. "No, I didn't," she replied in a shaky voice. Then, in a move that stole the breath from his lungs, she lifted the shirt and let it fall to the floor, standing completely naked before the fire. Her back was to him and the warm glow cast shadows that highlighted her perfect curves. "We're even now," she said, her voice tinged with a forced boldness. Adam could sense the false bravado in her tone. Though she tried to appear confident, he caught the slight tremble in her voice and the stiffness in her posture. When she bent to retrieve the shirt, Adam's voice, low and commanding, stopped her in her tracks. "Come here, Juliet." The raw need in his tone sent a shiver through her body. She froze for a moment, her breath hitching. "I won't ask again," he added, his voice laced with urgency. Juliet quivered. She then hesitated briefly before letting the shirt drop again. Taking tentative steps toward him, her heart pounded in her chest. Before she could close the distance, Adam moved like the wind, meeting her halfway. Hours later, Lewis, Adam, Dr. Juliet Bennett, and Dr. Cassandra Fields were on their way out of Everly Ranch. The two women sat in the back of the Jeep, with Lewis driving and Adam in the passenger seat. The car's interior was steeped in a calm, contented silence, a tranquil energy that felt almost surreal. "Directions, please," Lewis asked, breaking the quiet. Dr. Cassandra Fields leaned forward between the front seats and quickly programmed the destination into the dashboard navigation system. Adam chuckled at her efficiency. "Good job, Doc," Adam said, giving her an approving nod. Cassandra grinned in response. Lewis remained quiet, his focus on the road, while Juliet sat in her own world, still reeling from the whirlwind of emotions and sensations Adam had unleashed in her. Her mind played back the events of the past hour in vivid detail. The way he had commanded her, the intensity of his touch. It left her breathless even now. Her heart raced, and she felt the slight tremble in her thighs as the memory consumed her. Meanwhile, Cassandra fought the urge to lean forward and wrap her arms around Lewis from the back of the seat. She wasn't ready to feel disconnected from him, not after everything that had happened between them. Her mind swirled with thoughts of the night, the shocking intensity of it, and Lewis's unexpected confession about his PTSD, shared right after he'd almost shot her by mistake. But what lingered most was his lack of negative reaction to her admission about her inherited platelet disorder, a revelation that had torpedoed her past relationships. She had braced herself for rejection, expecting him to push her away, but instead he had loved her again and cursed himself afterward for the new bruises he had inadvertently caused. Even as she assured him it was okay, Lewis wanted to turn the Jeep around and head back to the ranch with Cassandra. That urge was the reason he kept pressing the accelerator. He figured the sooner he dropped her off and mentally and physically withdrew, the quicker he'd be able to make sense of what was happening to him. A rational part of him reminded him that Cassandra was a beautiful, obviously intelligent, and observant woman, which seemed like a reasonable explanation for his malady. But he had met beautiful women before, in all shapes and sizes, and none of them made him feel the need to protect them from the world, even from the disorder that seemed to define her. He couldn't help but wonder about that. It wasn't as if she had control over it. Her condition was inherited, and though it was complicated, every cut or wound could be potentially life-threatening. The thought of having to undergo surgery was probably a nightmare, let alone dealing with something as simple as a cut. He knew the condition could be managed, though. He wondered if the insecurity she showed earlier was due to the fools she had tried to compare him with. That thought made him growl mentally. The navigator's voice continued giving directions, reminding him they were just a few meters from their destination, which pulled his focus back to the road. Then the deep-set tire tracks ahead of them caught his attention right before Adam said, "Kill the light, Lewis." Lewis immediately obeyed. Adam pulled out his gun. "What's going on?" Cassandra asked in a quiet voice, her concern obvious. Juliet leaned in, equally curious. "I think you two have visitors," Lewis replied, his tone calm and steady. What do you mean?" Juliet asked in a trembling voice, though she had a good idea of what he meant. Lewis slowly reversed. Adam then instructed, "Can you two please put on your seatbelts, lean forward, and hold your interlaced hands behind your heads when you hear gunfire?" Cassandra and Juliet gasped. "What?" they both exclaimed in fear. Lewis tuned out everything happening inside the Jeep, focusing solely on his surroundings. Every molecule of his being was attuned to the dark, frozen world outside, waiting for any movement. Just before they reached the intersection at the end of the road, another truck blocked their path. Lewis shifted gears and accelerated, noting how Jen jumped from the truck and started shooting at them. He swerved the Jeep, spinning it 360 degrees to face the oncoming threat, then pressed the accelerator again. The men in front of the Jeep began firing. Lewis drowned out the women's fearful whimpers from the back seat, his eyes dark and cold as he concentrated on escaping with minimal contact with the assailants. "Put your heads down," Adam yelled at Cassandra and Juliet when they looked up from the position he'd instructed them to adopt, knowing exactly what Lewis was about to do. Lewis knew the Jeep was bulletproof. All Hawthorne guards had bulletproof vehicles. The alloy bull bar on the front wasn't just for show. The Jeep has been custom-made for ambushes like this. As the men scattered, they thought Lewis would ram into the truck blocking the intersection. Instead, Lewis swerved and targeted the men on his left, those who couldn't get out of the way fast enough. He crushed them as he drove through the snow, barely grazing the truck at the intersection. As he swerved back onto the road, agonizing cries filled the air, but Lewis continued without blinking. In his mind, he didn't see people, just imminent danger. His brain was in survival mode. Once past the intersection, the men likely expected Lewis to make a run for it, but he swerved again to face the parked truck. He rolled down the window for Adam as he accelerated toward it. Adam unleashed a hail of bullets, forcing the men to take cover. Lewis extended a hand with a gun, firing at the truck's tires before targeting the fuel tank. He continued shooting for about a minute before suddenly jerking the Jeep into reverse and swerving once more to face away from the truck at the intersection. A loud boom filled the air. Adam looked in the side mirror and saw no movement. Lewis rolled up the window and kept driving. Slowly, Juliet and Cassandra sat up. When Adam glanced in the rearview mirror, he saw them looking back through the rear window, but there was nothing to see, only a burning truck. Christ, who are those people? Cassandra muttered almost to herself, her voice shaking with horror. Could they be from Doug and Todd? That would be insane, right? What could they possibly want? Juliet asked, a mix of dread, disbelief, and anger in her voice. Revenge, maybe, Adam replied. Oh my God, that's crazy, Cassandra exclaimed in her British accent. All we wanted was to be left alone, she added, her voice filled with despair. Some people take rejection hard, Adam responded. Lewis remained silent, focusing on the road. He was relieved he hadn't just dropped the women at the hospital. If he had, they wouldn't have known about the attack that had been planned for the doctors. The thought of what could have happened if the doctors had been left alone gnawed at him, and he tightened his grip on the steering wheel. Adam didn't like how things were unfolding and suppressed the urge to ask if the doctors were all right. It was clear they weren't, but he was glad the women only had to worry about emotional distress. They were safe, and that was all that mattered. We'll come for your things at daybreak, Adam assured them. Thank you, Cassandra said. Thank you so much, Juliet added. Neither man replied. Once they returned to the ranch, Lewis dropped Adam and Juliet off at Adam's cottage and drove to his own, not speaking to Cassandra. After parking the jeep and entering his cottage, he stood by the fire staring into the flickering embers. Lewis, Cassandra called, wanting him to say something. He seemed so cold and distant that it scared her. Although she and Juliet hadn't witnessed what Lewis and Adam had done to the assailants, they had heard the screams and cries of agony. She'd never had to shoot anyone and couldn't imagine what it felt like to disarm or kill, but she figured Lewis and Adam must know. She feared that Lewis's PTSD had something to do with it. She was worried about his mental state and hoped he was okay. I'm glad you're safe, Cassie, Lewis said quietly. Cassandra hesitated for a moment, then stepped up behind him and gently wrapped her arms around him. Lewis let out a shaky breath, trying to push the nightmares from his mind. He turned in her arms, cupped her jaw, and kissed her. I'm glad you're safe, he repeated, his voice softer now. At Adam's cottage, as soon as they entered and Adam shut the door, Juliet rushed into his arms. Adam slowly wrapped his arms around her. They were waiting for us, she said, her voice full of fear. Adam buried his face in her hair. I know we just met, but trust me when I say they will never get close enough to hurt you, he promised. Juliet tightened her grip on him. A few hours later, as Nathaniel, Aria, Tom Hill, Dawn, Anita, and Ethan headed inside while Andrew, Stephen, Justin, and Ash stayed back to handle Pamela's issue and wait for the sheriff, Aria saw Dr. Juliet Bennett and Dr. Cassandra Fields approaching with Adam and Lewis. She exchanged a look with Anita, who was already grinning. I really need those two here in Sylvan Ridge, Aria murmured. Anita, knowing exactly what Aria meant, burst into giggles. When Nathaniel noticed that Aria had paused at the entrance of the house, he said to Tom, please go sit down. I'll join you in a minute. He then glanced at Dawn, who hurried to her father's side to escort him inside. Nathaniel then joined Aria and Anita. Standing behind Aria, he leaned forward, dipped his face close to her ear, and said, Isn't that the doctors from the hospital with Adam and Lewis? Aria nodded and craned her neck to look up at his face. Yes, baby, she whispered. Something must have happened, Nathaniel said, his brows furrowing with concern. Aria grew worried at his assertion and moved to meet the approaching group halfway. Nathaniel followed her with Anita walking alongside them. Adam and Lewis had decided to bring Cassandra and Juliet to the main building, so Dr. Hawthorne would know they were at the ranch and not yet at the hospital. They had also intended to inform Andrew, Jake, and Charles about the earlier incident with the assailants on their way to the doctor's house. However, upon seeing Dr. Hawthorne waiting for them alongside Nathaniel, Adam gestured for Andrew to join them. Andrew, noticing the subtle summons, left Ash and Stephen with Justin and headed in that direction. He then saw Jake appear with Dr. Hart and gestured for him to come along as well. Jake apologized to Evangeline and hurried ahead, gesturing for the nearest guard to accompany her. Evangeline chuckled when a hefty guard suddenly appeared beside her, grinning down at her. Good morning, Dr. Hart, he greeted, and it was Will. Evangeline beamed at him, remembering all that Dr. Yen had disclosed the day before during the ladies' private time out. Will narrowed his gaze at her, suspicion etched on his face, making her giggle. Meanwhile, Andrew, Jake, and Charles hurried to join Adam and Lewis, circling behind Dr. Juliet Bennett and Dr. Cassandra Fields. "Good morning, boss," Cassandra greeted in her distinct British accent. "Good morning, Dr. Hawthorne, Mr. Hawthorne," Juliet added. Aria immediately noticed Cassandra's unusually conservative attire. Nearly every part of her body was covered. The only visible skin was her face, and even that was partially hidden by a scarf pulled up below her nose. Aria's worried frown deepened. "Are you two okay? Good morning?" Aria asked quickly. Nathaniel didn't respond. His attention focused on his men as he scanned them for visible injuries. "We are fine, thanks to Adam, Lewis, Mr. Darfield, and..." Cassandra began but hesitated. "And the other guy standing over there," Juliet finished, pointing toward Ash. "What happened?" Aria asked, her voice tinged with dread. "There's, a bit of a problem," Lewis said, glancing at Nathaniel for silent approval to speak in front of Dr. Hawthorne. Nathaniel gave a curt nod. "So yesterday we went out on a patrol with Jake," Adam began, recounting the incident at the bar in the hospital. He deliberately omitted the part where Juliet kissed him. Juliet lowered her gaze at that moment, her discomfort evident. "So, Cassandra, you and Juliet were forced to spend the night here?" Aria asked, her tone carrying a trace of annoyance. "Yes, boss," the two women replied in unison. "This is incredible," Anita muttered in exasperation. "This morning we thought about taking them back to their house and then to the hospital since they're needed for Blackwood's surgery," Lewis explained. "Yes," Aria affirmed, nodding. "On the road leading to their house, we were attacked," Adam continued. "And it wasn't just a couple of people. There had to be close to 10 of them," he added. "What?" Aria and Anita exclaimed together. "We had to bring them back here and decided to wait for daylight," Lewis chimed in. Aria ran her hands over her face. "Where is Ethan? And who the hell are Doug and Todd?" She growled in annoyance. "I can't put a face to those names either," Anita muttered with a frown. Her gaze darted about and then landed on Justin. She then added, "Oh, let's ask Justin. He should have more up-to-date information about the locals than we or Ethan do," she suggested. "Graham!" Andrew called out. When the man looked in their direction, Andrew motioned for him to come over. Nathaniel raised his hands to Aria's shoulders, gently kneading them. She leaned back into him, her tension visibly easing under his touch. Justin joined the group with a frown, his eyes darting with curiosity. "Who are Doug and Todd, Justin?" Aria asked, her tone laced with keen interest. Justin grimaced. "Oh boy, please tell me none of the guys had an encounter with them," he said, worry etched across his face. "They sound like trouble," Andrew remarked. "A lot of trouble," Justin affirmed. "Doug is Old Man Peckham's grandson, Aria. Anita, remember Old Man Peckham, the guy who owned the patch of land close to Shadow Peak Mountain?" Anita's eyes widened. "The one with the dogs?" she replied. "Yes," Justin confirmed. "I remember him. He was a really nice old man, but also kind of scary," Aria added. "Yeah, well, he's dead now. Supposedly eaten by his own dogs, right around the time Doug showed up. I started getting concerned about how many questionable characters began streaming into town as soon as Doug moved up that mountain. I did some digging and found out Doug had a rap sheet as long as my arm. The last thing he was accused of before showing up here was physical assault, but he got off because the victim refused to testify at the last minute." Aria and Anita shared a worried look. Todd was already a petty menace before Doug came, but since then, he's been getting bolder. The problem is they've learned to cover their tracks, so there's not much the sheriff can do without evidence. And I'm not entirely sure, but I think one of the Blackwoods has gotten real chummy with them, Justin explained. "Is that Blackwood by any chance named Benedict?" Nathaniel probed, his voice carrying a hint of mockery. Justin nodded. "I see. They can't be that smart if they're using a story about a dog eating its owner as a cover-up. Dogs don't do that. Cats? Maybe," Nathaniel quipped, meeting Andrew's gaze and holding it. "Now, regarding motive, there's no telling if this was just about Dr. Bennett and Dr. Fields refusing their advances and things escalated to a lethal confrontation, or if it's part of a larger motivation to rally folks with a common cause." "The enemy of my enemy, they say," Nathaniel said with a shrug. "You think this is more than just two men reacting to being humiliated?" Aria asked, turning to look at Nathaniel. "It's possible," Nathaniel replied with a nod. But right now, our priority is to protect our staff and the workers at the hospital and ensure these men don't come anywhere near here, Nathaniel said. Although he had a different tactical approach in mind, Nathaniel refrained from sharing it in front of Arya, Anita, and Justin. We also need to report this to the sheriff, Arya pointed out. Of course, honey, Nathaniel agreed, though his eyes shifted to Andrew, Charles, and Jake. The three men exchanged subtle nods of acknowledgement. I was going to suggest we have the doctors stay here instead of at their house. Their house is quite secluded, but here, even when we're away, they'll have the guards, the groundsman, and his family for company and protection, Jake suggested. That's not an issue. They can use the cottages closest to the ranch exit. It'll make commuting easier, and this location is closer to the hospital, so it's practical, Nathaniel replied. However, his choice of the cottages near the ranch exit wasn't just for convenience. It was also for security. The groundsman, his family, and the 5 guards stationed at the ranch were all situated in that area, creating a contained zone. This setup ensured their movements were isolated from the rest of the ranch and established a first line of defense. Thank you, sir, Cassandra and Juliet said simultaneously, exchanging a smile before looking at Dr. Hawthorne. Thank you, boss, Cassandra said, with Juliet echoing her words. Andrew, please file a report with the sheriff and let them know about Doug. I know Justin said they're good at covering their tracks, but we should be able to find something to keep them away from our people, Arya said firmly. Don't worry, Dr. Hawthorne. We'll take care of it, Andrew assured her. Sometimes, men like that just need to see that their intimidation tactics won't work on everyone. And once they realize that, they'll back off, Charles added. Agreed, Jake said. Justin frowned slightly, unsure if the men were simply trying to calm Arya's worries. He doubted they believed what they were saying, but he kept quiet. He understood that security matters weren't always openly discussed in front of Arya. Well, welcome to Everleigh Ranch, Dr. Bennett, and you too, Dr. Fields. Please join us for breakfast, Arya said with a smile. Yes, breakfast. I'm starving, Anita said, making the ladies chuckle as she grabbed Juliet and then Arya by the arm. Cassandra followed, and the women headed inside, chatting together. The men stayed behind. And once the women were out of earshot, Justin started to speak, but the sound of an approaching truck caught his attention. Turning, he saw the sheriff and 2 deputies arriving. Justin moved to meet them as the trucks rolled to a stop near Pamela's jeep. What's the condition of the men who attacked you, Lewis? Adam? Nathaniel asked, as his men flanked him almost in automatic symphony. Andrew stood on one side with Charles and Adam, while Jake and Lewis positioned themselves on the other. Dead, Lewis replied. All of them, Adam added. Good. 10 less idiots to deal with, Nathaniel muttered. His gaze shifted to the sheriff, who was glancing their way with a weary expression. Nathaniel was certain the man already knew about the deaths. Are we denying it? Charles asked, smirking. Since Justin has been so generous in filling us in on the area's security, he added. We let him talk, Jake answered. The men exchanged nods, understanding they would neither confirm nor deny anything. The 6 of them walked leisurely towards the sheriff, his deputies, Justin, Anton, Ash, and Stephen. They stopped a reasonable distance away, observing as one of the deputies took Justin's statement, while the another 2 moved to carry Pamela from her car to one of the patrol vehicles. The sheriff turned and spotted Nathaniel. Adjusting his hat, he walked over, offering a strained attempt at humor. Good morning, Mr. Hawthorne, gentlemen. Looks like you're getting quite the interesting welcome. Eh? Nathaniel and the others remained expressionless, not offering even a flicker of amusement. Thanks for coming. I'd very much like that woman and her car off my wife's property, Nathaniel said, his voice low and unfeeling. The sheriff quickly nodded. Sure, Mr. Hawthorne. But you're not thinking of pressing charges against her, are you? There was an undertone to his voice that made Andrew frown. Nathaniel caught it, as did the rest of the men. Why would you ask that question? Jake interjected, folding his arms across his chest, his gaze darkening. The sheriff let out a nervous laugh. I'm sorry, it's just... We've received reports about what happened yesterday at the bar between your men, Mr. Hawthorne, and Doug and Todd. Then this morning, we got a call about nearly a dozen men dead at Ravenwood Junction. Folks around here are unsettled by the sudden spike in deaths since your arrival, and they're saying you've got His voice trailed off as he gestured subtly toward Ash. "They're saying what?" Jake growled, almost snarling with teeth bared as he took a step forward with Andrew, Charles, Lewis, and Adam. All of them glared at the sheriff, their expressions intense. The older man swallowed hard, his face paling as he stepped back. "Some nonsense about Mr. Hawthorne being a mafia lord and bringing in a werewolf," he stammered, dabbing his temple with a handkerchief despite the snow and freezing temperature. "Well, maybe we should hold a party and introduce everyone to the Hawthorne family then." A female voice interjected from behind Nathaniel and the men. They turned to see Miss Everly approaching with a smile. "Hello, Patrick," she greeted the sheriff warmly. Nathaniel was struck by two issues at once, the sheriff implying Ash might be a werewolf, and the way the sheriff's gaze softened, becoming more intent as he looked at Miss Everly. Unsure which to address first, Nathaniel glanced at Miss Everly and noticed the warm smile on her face. A surge of protectiveness rose in him. He stepped back to stand beside the older woman, draping an arm over her shoulders and fixing a pointed look at the sheriff, who gave him a sheepish smile as he rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. "Hello to you too, Helena," the sheriff said, his tone uneven. "You, look, great," he managed, his eyes briefly sweeping down her frame. "Ah, still the charmer, I see," Miss Everly replied, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her left ear without realizing it. Nathaniel raised an eyebrow at her, eliciting a giggle and a playful smack on his chest. "I just say it like it is. I'm glad to see you and Aria happy," the sheriff said, his voice softening. "I see you're quite close to my wife and her aunt, Sheriff," Nathaniel remarked, his tone laced with curiosity. "Oh, Helena and I practically grew up in the same neighborhood. We even attended high school together. And she had always been a doting aunt," the sheriff explained, a bittersweet smile crossing his face. "That's interesting," Nathaniel said, holding Miss Everly's gaze. "Thank you for your suggestion. We'll discuss it and see how viable it is," he added, and reverted his gaze to the sheriff. "All the townfolk need is to get up close and personal with you and the men. Once they see how harmless you are, they'll find something else to speculate about," Miss Everly suggested. "I'm still in shock. They think Ash is a werewolf," Charles muttered, scowling. "Like I said, it's laughable. But there are people around here. Once they get an idea in their heads, it's nearly impossible to shake it loose," the sheriff replied with a small chuckle. "A social gathering like Helena suggested could help." "Thank you, but we need to discuss Pamela Anderson," Andrew interjected, gesturing towards the patrol cars. He clearly wanted to draw the sheriff away, both to address the safety concerns regarding Everly Hospital staff and, if necessary, to discuss the attack at Ravenwood Junction. The sheriff nodded in understanding, but before stepping back, turned to Miss Everly and said, "See you around, Helena." Then he walked away with Andrew and the others following. Jake didn't like any of it. The rumor about Ash unsettled him. The young man was already self-conscious about his unusual eye color, and this gossip would only make things harder for him. Jake doubted that a social gathering where Ash would feel like a spectacle was the best solution. While he understood the intent to show the townspeople they were harmless, he also believed it posed a serious security risk. He trusted that Nathaniel wouldn't agree to it, or at least would scrutinize the venue carefully. "Can we not mention the rumor about one of my men being likened to a beast around my men, Sheriff?" Jake heard Andrew say in a cold, no-nonsense tone. Jake felt a surge of pride for the older man. Andrew had beaten him to it. He had been about to warn the sheriff to watch his words around Ash. The sheriff gave Andrew a weary glance. Jake then spoke up. "He's young and already self-conscious. It would be downright cruel to let this taint him further. Cruelty to him will not be tolerated." His voice was low and cold. The sheriff turned to Jake with a thoughtful frown, then nodded in acknowledgement. "I have one question. Is that his normal eye color? I heard it turned blood red," the older man pressed. "The person who told you that clearly has a vivid imagination," Andrew replied. "His eyes don't actually turn blood red. They just give that illusion because of the purplish hue. His eyes have specks of different shades of purple, and depending on the lighting, it can appear as though the color changes." The sheriff breathed a sigh of relief. "Understood," he said simply. Meanwhile, Nathaniel guided Miss Everly toward the house, keeping a firm but gentle hold on her shoulders. "So, are we going to talk about the sheriff making googly eyes at you?" he teased. Miss Everly's shoulders shook as she laughed. "I'm 48 years old, Nate," she replied. "Your point," Nathaniel shot back, which only made her laugh harder as she wrapped an arm around his waist. "I think I can handle myself," she said fondly. "I'm still responsible for you," Nathaniel countered, adopting a mock-serious tone. "So, no secret meetings with the sheriff and definitely no PDA." Before he could finish, Miss Everly broke into another fit of laughter as they entered the living room. His fatherly demeanor paired with his deadpan delivery was too much for her to take seriously. "What's so funny, Big Mama?" Liam asked curiously, walking into the room with his mom. Arya and Liam had come to fetch Nathaniel after Miss Everly, who had volunteered to retrieve him, had taken her sweet time. "Good question," Nathaniel quipped, raising an eyebrow at Miss Everly, who playfully swatted him before stepping away to take Liam's hand. "Don't mind your dad, sweetie." "He's just being plain naughty," Miss Everly said with a mischievous grin. "No, I'm not. I've got my eyes on you, young lady," Nathaniel called after her, his tone light and teasing. Liam grinned at his dad, his young face alight with curiosity. "What exactly did you do, Big Mama?" he asked, his interest evident. Miss Everly chuckled. "You are so nosy, it's uncanny," she teased, pulling his nose and making him giggle. "I'm going to find out, though," he declared with a mischievous grin and a determined nod. Miss Everly laughed. Arya approached him, a smile on her face and curiosity shining in her eyes. "What happened?" she asked, clearly amused. Nathaniel pulled her close and explained the situation with the sheriff, his exasperation evident. By the time he finished, Arya was laughing too. Nathaniel scowled at her. "I don't know what's so funny," he said, his tone edged with mock annoyance. Arya stretched up and pressed a soft kiss to his jaw. "You're the best, and clearly Esme is in big trouble." "You will not hear any complaints from me, though," she murmured against his skin. Nathaniel grinned. Outside, by the time Andrew, Jake, Charles, Adam, Lewis, and the sheriff reached Anton, Justin, Ash, and Stephen, Justin had finished giving his report. One of the deputies moved to stand behind the sheriff, while the other three began getting into their patrol cars. "We will take Mrs. Graham to the hospital, have her admitted, and station a deputy to watch her. When she wakes up, we'll get her account of the situation and let her know that Justin is pressing charges," the sheriff said, meeting Justin's gaze as if expecting him to retract his words. But Justin didn't waver. He returned the older man's stare, unflinching. The sheriff let out a sigh and nodded before turning to meet Andrew's gaze. "Regarding the events at Ravenwood Junction, I'm not accusing you folks of anything. We're still investigating, and it's a bit tricky because none of those men are locals. But I'll just put it out there. I would prefer that grievances be reported to the Sylvan Ridge precinct and left for us, the authorities, to handle. Again, I'm not accusing you folks of anything," he added firmly. The deputy behind him, however, glowered at the group. Andrew and the rest of the men continued to maintain eye contact, showing no flicker of emotion in response. "Thank you, Sheriff. I'll be coming to your office to file a report against 2 men named Doug and Todd," Andrew said in a polite tone, then offered a smile which didn't reach his eyes, making him look quite menacing. "These are the same men my team had an altercation with yesterday at the local bar. These men were also seen at Everly Hospital yesterday, harassing Dr. Juliet Bennett. I believe that incident carried over to the bar. We are willing to treat it as a misunderstanding, and I would like those gentlemen to be informed to stay away from the hospital and our doctors." The sheriff and the deputy exchanged a glance. After a brief pause, the sheriff lowered his gaze before meeting Andrew's eyes again. "There's a problem with that, though," he said, his dark blue eyes hooded and piercing. "What problem?" Lewis growled, his tone lined with a hard edge. The sheriff swallowed uneasily before replying. "The men who sustained injuries yesterday were admitted to the Everleigh Hospital," he supplied. "Why the Everleigh Hospital?" Adam asked, irritation evident in his voice. Lewis worked his jaw in annoyance. "It's the best around," the deputy answered matter-of-factly. The sheriff shrugged helplessly. Jake held his hands out to pat Adam and Lewis on the back, silently signaling them to quiet down. The two retreated. "Well, if that's the case, I suppose you and your deputies will need to help us ensure they don't pose a threat to the other patients and the hospital staff," Jake said with a pandering smile. "That we can do," the sheriff replied with a confident nod. All right then. Looks like we are done here, Charles added. The sheriff nodded in acknowledgement and turned to leave. Near the jeep, where Pamela was, Ash and Stephen had seen one of the deputies remove the tie Ash had used to bind Pamela's wrist, gently helping her sit comfortably in the back seat. Ash didn't know why, but he thought that was foolish. The police kept underestimating the brunette when she seemed intent on causing bodily harm to Justin. Something in Ash told him she was awake now. It had been close to 2 hours since the incident that knocked her out, and Ash figured even a deliberate blow to the head aimed at rendering someone unconscious shouldn't take this long to wear off. Then, as the deputy started the car, Pamela lunged forward, reaching for the gun tucked in the man's holster. Ash and Stephen watched from the back seat side window. The deputy raised his hands as Pamela held the gun to his head and snarled, "I'm not leaving without my son." Ash figured the woman either really loved her son or had completely lost it. "Calm down, Pam," the deputy in the driver's seat implored. One of the deputies in the other car noticed something was going on and hurried down, alerting the others. His brows furrowed when he saw Ash and Stephen just standing there watching. The deputy hurried to the side where Ash and Stephen were, still darting puzzled glances in their way. He pulled the back door open, and Pamela immediately trained the gun on him as she stepped out, her hand extended forward. Ash used the edge of his right hand to strike her wrist, making her cry out in pain as the gun drooped limply from her hand. "You bastard!" she cried out. "You freaking weirdo! You broke my hand!" she added in great anguish. Ash didn't react. He just leaned back against the car while Stephen took the gun from Pamela's limp hand with his gloved hand and offered it to the deputy, who still had his hands raised. Then, as if snapping out of his fear, lunged forward to subdue Pamela, and this time he wasn't gentle as he read her rights. The sheriff, who had turned around to watch the scene unfold, stared in surprise at his situation. "On second thought, maybe you should have me on speed dial," Andrew said, then gave the sheriff a friendly pat on the back. "With Anderson and the Blackwoods, I'm sure you'll have your hands full." The sheriff, feeling a bit embarrassed, glanced at Andrew and offered a faint smirk before moving on. Before long, the deputies and the sheriff left, with one of the deputies driving Pamela's car. "Are we calling in the cavalry yet?" Stephen asked as he and Ash joined the others. "What? You can't handle a bunch of Alaskan thugs?" Andrew teased, earning chuckles from the group. "We've got Andrew, Jake, Charles, Aidan, Anton, Adam, Lewis, Will, and the boss. I'd say we're good," Ash remarked, hooking his thumbs into his belt loops. "No, I think our secret weapon is you, Ash," Andrew quipped, draping an arm over Ash's shoulders as they all started walking toward the house. Ash shot him a suspicious look, glancing at Jake and Charles as well. "What's going on? Why are you all being nice? Especially Charles, he is too quiet. He's making me nervous," Ash said. Jake chuckled as Charles scoffed. "Hell will freeze over before I start worrying about sparing your feelings, you snotty little punk," Charles retorted. Ash grinned, a really rare sight. Andrew's heart tightened with emotion. "Love you too, Charles," Ash quipped, making everyone laugh. Charles swatted him on the back of the head, hiding a fond smile. As Nathaniel guided Arya towards the entrance of the dining room where everyone had gathered, his thoughts drifted to her aunt's suggestion. She had proposed throwing a party to invite the townsfolk, fostering familiarity and curbing the nonsensical rumors circulating about him and his men. Left to his own devices, Nathaniel would have ignored the entire matter and let people think whatever they wanted. However, this was his wife's hometown. Beyond her family's investments, Arya still had friends and extended relatives living there. Seeking her opinion on the matter seemed the prudent course of action. "Babe," Nathaniel began, glancing at her as they continued walking toward the slightly open double doors at the far end of the hallway. The word made Arya pause, looking up at him curiously. Nathaniel gently urged her forward, and they resumed walking. "The sheriff thinks we need to do some kind of PR by hosting a party," he said, a subtle smirk playing on his lips. "You know, mingle a bit with the locals to stop giving them ideas." "Wonderful, here we go," Arya replied, a mix of sarcasm and exasperation in her tone. "What are they saying I've done now? Last I heard, they'd conveniently forgotten how they treated me after my dad died. how I had to scrape and scramble to pay off his debts. I was a disgraced child back then, but once they heard about my success, suddenly I became the town's idol, along with my father, whose good deeds only became relevant again after my accomplishments. And let's not even start on the uproar when I asked everyone to start paying for their medical expenses. Don't get me started on what they've said about Ethan. She paused, her expression growing more animated. Trust me, my love, whatever we do, the townsfolk will always have an opinion, and it's usually ridiculously insane. She finished with mock horror, her eyes widening comically. Nathaniel couldn't help but chuckle. Well, that makes me feel better about what they're saying now. According to them, I'm a mafia boss, and Ash is a werewolf. Arya gasped, her mouth falling open in exaggerated disbelief before bursting into laughter. Please tell me you're joking, she said, still giggling. Nope, I'm a mafia, and Ash is a werewolf, Nathaniel repeated, his tone comically hesitant, which only made Arya laugh harder. Meanwhile, Tristan, faced with the dilemma of what combination of food to eat despite Dr. Hart's recommendations, found the options overwhelming. Deciding he needed his dad's help, he headed toward the slightly ajar dining room doors. Just as he got to the doors, he overheard Nathaniel affirming he was a mafia. That revelation didn't surprise Tristan. He had already pieced that together on his own. But learning that one of Liam and Owen's uncles was a werewolf, that was new. His brows furrowed as he processed the information. He wasn't sure whether he should be afraid or feel even more confident about his decision to be friends with Liam and Hawthorne. Surely, having connections to a werewolf had to be a great power move. Tristan? Miss Everleigh's voice broke through his thoughts. He turned to see the older man gesturing for him. Come sit with Liam. I've served your food, she said. Thank you, Big Mama, Tristan replied, echoing the affectionate name Liam and Owen always used. He hurried to the table, but his mind kept circling the new information about Liam and Owen's uncle being a shapeshifter. Why are you frowning so much? Don't you like the food? Owen asked, as Tristan took his seat and reached for his cutlery. Instead of eating, Tristan paused, staring into space. Owen's questions snapped him out of his thoughts. It's not the food, Tristan said, finally taking a bite. It tastes good, he added after chewing. Are you still upset about your mom and dad? Liam asked in a hushed tone, leaning forward to see Tristan's face better. No, it's not that, Tristan replied, uncertain whether he should share what he had overheard. Meanwhile, Nathaniel walked into the room with Arya, the two still discussing the party and the townsfolk. I take it our very unwanted visitor has been carted away, Ethan asked as soon as he spotted them. Yep, Nathaniel replied succinctly. Just then, Alex and Anna entered, followed by Andrew and Justin's group. What do you think about organizing some kind of carnival with competitions and inviting the townsfolk to join us, but not here, somewhere else? Arya suggested, continuing the idea she had brought up to Nathaniel earlier. Ethan groaned. Why are we doing that? What happened? He asked, scowling. I'm sure you can guess, some nonsensical rumors going around, Arya replied dismissively as Nathaniel guided her to sit down. He started to serve her food, ignoring the maids that immediately came to stand behind him and Arya. He gently placed a plate of food in front of her. Thank you, my love, Arya said with an affectionate smile as Alex and Anna settled into their seats. A carnival in the snow would be fun, Anna said, clapping her hands together with childlike enthusiasm. Isla nodded, adding, I can't remember ever attending a carnival, least of one with a snowbound theme. I am more of a book rat. Wow, that's just sad, Ethan said with a deadpan expression eliciting laughter from everyone around the table. Isla's cheeks flushed with embarrassment, but Ethan leaned in and pressed a quick kiss to the corner of her mouth. Don't worry, because of you, I might actually agree to this suicide mission, he quipped. Isla gave him an adoring glance, her embarrassment melting into affection. Dr. Juliet Bennett and Dr. Cassandra Fields watched the exchange with smiles, quietly observing the couple's dynamic. Dr. Yen, however, had her eyes on Will as soon as he walked into the room. Almost as if he could feel her gaze, Will turned in her direction. Yen smiled softly before quickly lowering her eyes. Will smirked to himself as he joined the other men at the table, helping himself to breakfast. He figured he must be doing something right to get that kind of smile from Kim. Maybe this might actually work for good, he thought to himself. At the other end of the dining table, Justin took the empty seat beside Tristan, giving the boy a searching look. He couldn't stop thinking about what Nathaniel had said regarding the boy witnessing Pamela's meltdown. Justin felt a pang of inadequacy as he wondered what to say. Should he tell Tristan the truth or shield him with a lie? Meanwhile, Andrew settled into the seat next to Anita, who froze mid-bite as she realized he had caught her stuffing her mouth full of food. Andrew grinned at the quiet dismay on her face, chuckling softly as she chewed slowly and swallowed with obvious effort. He reached over, wiping a bit of beef sauce from the corner of her mouth, his eyes warm as they met hers. "Hey, cutie," he said in a low, teasing tone. Anita giggled softly. "Sir, you might need your eyes checked if you still think I'm cute while I'm over here looking like a chipmunk in distress," she quipped. Andrew laughed. "I understand you're eating for two. I don't mind," he replied. Anita's eyes welled with tears for no apparent reason. "You better not make me cry," she warned, her voice wavering slightly. Leaning in, Andrew kissed her gently. "Go on and cry, and I'll kiss you, silly. I don't mind your tears as long as they're happy ones," he teased, making Anita beam at him. "Don't forget to leave room for when we go visit your uncle, though," he reminded her with a smile. Anita giggled and nodded, her earlier embarrassment melting away. Jake, who had settled beside Evangeline, smiled as he served himself, gesturing for her to stay put when she made a move to help. His heart flipped at her searching gaze. He still couldn't believe she was his, and that she was carrying his child. The past few days had been the happiest of his life, and he was terrified something or someone might ruin it. He winked at her, letting his eyes slowly trail over her features, making her blush. To Jake, she was perfect, and she was all his. He was relieved she had accepted his reassurances about Luke Greetham and had begun to relax, knowing the bastard could never get close enough to hurt her again. Settling down to eat, Jake tuned into the conversation as Nathaniel and the others discussed organizing a carnival instead of a party. He wasn't in favor of the idea of a public gathering at all. Though they had the Blackwoods in custody, Jake knew they couldn't hold all of them indefinitely, except for Benedict Blackwood. The other two brothers and their mother had not yet been linked to Ethan Blackwood's attempted murder, meaning they couldn't be detained much longer. Even the case of maltreatment and poisoning against Ian Blackwood still needed to go through court before they could be sure the Blackwoods were dealt with. Then there was the matter of Doug and Todd. Jake didn't trust the two men. They seemed like potential hired guns Luke Greetham might use to gather information or launch an attack. He couldn't blame Nathaniel or Dr. Hawthorne for entertaining the sheriff's suggestion. They didn't know Luke Greetham posed a potential threat. "A carnival is a great idea, but maybe we could hold it the day before we head back to New York," Andrew suggested. Jake grinned to himself, keeping his face down and his focus on his food so no one would notice his amusement. "Perhaps the night before we leave," Charles added. Jake couldn't help but think Andrew might be developing telepathic abilities as he got older. This was the second time that day he'd beaten Jake to an intervention. "Whatever you decide, I'm fine with it, as long as we all agree that I don't want the party or carnival held here, and there's no expectation for me to be overly social," Nathaniel said, drawing laughter from everyone. "What's wrong with you, man? You used to love parties," Alex teased. "Can't you tell?" Nathaniel replied, setting down his fork. "I found a few grey hairs this morning." Tom scoffed, Ethan burst into laughter, and Alex stared at Nathaniel in mock shock. Anna giggled, while Anita added, "That must have been a trick of the light, Nate." "You all have terrible guest etiquette, Sut," Nathaniel said, pretending to be offended. "When I speak, you're supposed to nod and smile." His exaggerated tone made the group laugh again. "Besides, I'm saving myself for the bachelorette party. That's where my priorities lie." "I believe you, old man Nathan," Arya teased, running her hand playfully across his back. Nathaniel laughed out loud. The conversation shifted as Ethan proposed holding the carnival at a popular ski resort nearby. "I can help set that up. The owner, Ralph Warren, is a friend," Justin offered. "That's great, thanks," Nathaniel replied. Justin grinned, pleased to have a chance to contribute to the group. "Can we come to the carnival, Daddy?" Liam asked excitedly. "Of course, son," Nathaniel replied, smiling warmly at him. Liam beamed, practically bouncing in his seat. Can I come too? Tristan asked eagerly. I'm pretty sure that's automatic, Tristan, Nathaniel said with a chuckle. The boy grinned and nodded. Can we help plan it, Dad? Owen chimed in. Absolutely. Any help is welcome, Nathaniel said. Owen nodded seriously, his expression thoughtful as if he were already working on ideas. Nathaniel and Arya exchanged a proud smile at their responsible little boy. The lively discussion around the table continued with laughter and chatter. When Stephen called to Ash to pass him the bowl of barbecue ribs, the mention of Ash's name caught Tristan's attention. He muttered under his breath, So that's the werewolf? Liam, overhearing, leaned in with a confused expression. Did you say werewolf? Realizing he'd been overheard, Tristan quickly replied, Earlier I heard your dad say your Uncle Ash is a werewolf. Liam narrowed his eyes at Tristan, trying to gauge whether he was joking. He knew there was no such thing as a werewolf, and his dad wasn't the type to entertain such nonsense. He figured the boy must be playing tricks or had misunderstood something he'd heard. He caught Owen's gaze on him. His brother wore that annoying look, watching him with a raised eyebrow, as if expecting him to do something foolish, like accept such nonsense. Liam glared at him before turning back to Tristan. Tell me exactly what you heard, he demanded in a hushed tone. Tristan's brows furrowed as worry crept in. Liam looked angry, and the last thing Tristan wanted to do was upset him. He wasn't foolish enough to lose an ally with a mafia father and a werewolf uncle. Okay, he said, quoting, I'm a mafia and Ash is a werewolf. Owen shook his head, laughing. Liam's brows furrowed in concern for Tristan. It seemed the wound on the boy's head was affecting him. Poor thing. That's what you heard? Liam asked. That's what he said, I promise, Tristan replied. Listen to me, say the words and tell me if this is how he sounded. I'm a mafia and Ash is a werewolf, Liam mimicked, deepening his voice and tilting it mockingly, the way his dad used to when making fun of someone or something. Tristan's frown deepened as he nodded. Yeah, that's how he sounded, although your voice is a little off, he said. My voice is not up for review, Tristan. I said to focus on my intonation, Liam repeated with irritation. When Owen chuckled again, Liam leaned over to him and said, I swear I will choke you if you laugh one more time, he threatened. Owen arched his left brow defiantly at his brother, then swatted him on the tip of the nose. What's going on, boys? Nathaniel, who had seen the action, asked from the head of the table. Nothing, Dad, just Liam making empty threats. Again, Owen said, emphasizing the last word. Liam glowered at him. No fighting, Arya said, pointing at the two of them. Yes, Mom, they chorused in unison. Miss Everly, who was closest to the boys, overheard their whispered conversation and smiled to herself in amusement. After the boys got a scolding, wanting to end the argument, she leaned into Liam and said, You were right. Your dad must have said that in mockery. It's a rumor, and the carnival's suggestion is to curb the nonsense. Liam drew back and looked up into her eyes, his lips stretching into a mischievous smile. No, now, Liam Anthony Hawthorne. I know that look. Behave, she said, poking him on the tip of his nose, making him giggle. Owen, who hadn't heard what his big mama had whispered to Liam, sat up in his seat and wrapped his arms around her back, leaning in to whisper in her ear. What did you say, big mama? Miss Everly chuckled, wrapping her arms around him. I wonder just where you two got this nosy attitude from, because it's not from our side, she quipped, pressing a kiss to Owen's temple and holding him, which made him giggle. She then whispered the information to him. Liam got up and wrapped his arms around his big mama as well, eager to hear whatever was being said. Nathaniel shook with laughter when Arya said, Could you two please stop and not suffocate my aunt? A ripple of laughter echoed around the room. The older woman laughed as the twins refused to let go. Jake watched Liam and Owen with a smile as Evangeline remarked, They're so cute. He had plenty of nicknames for the twins, but Quiet definitely wasn't one of them, especially not for Liam. Jake could almost sense the boy plotting something, and his suspicions were confirmed when he saw Liam pull back from his big mama and glance in Ash's direction. Owen is cute. That dwarfling beside him, though, is what you call an evil genius, Jake quipped in a hushed tone, making Evangeline laugh. She could hear the fondness in his voice and saw the warmth in his smile as he watched Liam, clearly trying to figure out the boy's next move. The Twins are an unusual pair, Evangeline said fondly, her hand resting affectionately on her baby bump. I love that Eli will have playmates and big brothers like them. If they're even half as protective as they are now, I have nothing to worry about. Her smile widened as she spoke. Jake glanced at her, his heart swelling with emotion at her words. The natural way she embraced the role of mother to his son, as though she were Eli's biological mother rather than Julia, often touched him deeply. It always stirred something within him, leaving him emotional. He supposed it was because he was in awe that there existed a human being so loving and selfless. And most of all, that person was his. Under the table, he reached for her free hand and gently squeezed it. When she turned to look at him, he kept his gaze on the twins across the table, though his thoughts were elsewhere, filled with images of Evangeline being a mother, not just to Eli, but to the children they might have together. When he finally looked back at her and caught her gaze, he gave her a warm smile, though. Don't worry about playmates. We'll give him that in addition to the Hawthornes, the McLeods, and the McAllisters, he said, mentioning the surnames of his close friends. His mind wandered to the family they could build and grow, all under the banner of love and unity Nathaniel Hawthorne had nurtured. He made a mental note to revisit his thoughts about acquiring properties around the Hawthorne estate in New York and decided he'd finally carve out time to discuss it with Tom Hill. Evangeline's face lit up at his words, her lovely blue eyes glistening with emotion as she nodded. Dad, whoever thought of doing a carnival is super smart. It's such an awesome idea. Owen and I could invite some of our old school friends, but only the cool ones. It'd be the best fun ever, like the kind you never forget, Liam said, nodding eagerly. Now you're just making it sound way too good, Owen grumbled with a groan. What? I'm just saying it's a good idea, that's all, Liam replied, his grin way too cheerful. Andrew couldn't hold back his laughter, while Evangeline giggled beside Jake. Jake folded his arms across his chest, trying to figure out what the little imp was up to this time. Dr. Juliet Bennett and Dr. Cassandra Fields, the newest additions to the group, both went, "Oh." Meanwhile, Anita mirrored Arya's expression, both women narrowing their gazes at Liam with suspicion. "I've got my eyes on you, kid," Anita said to him. Liam batted his eyelashes innocently, took a sip of water and dabbed his lips with a napkin, mimicking the manners of a perfect child. Tom's shoulders shook as he laughed out loud. Arya smacked Nathaniel on the side, drawing his attention. "What did I do?" he asked, his voice low and husky. Leaning into him, she whispered, "I'm pretty sure you were quite a handful growing up." Nathaniel gave her a hooded smile, one she found quite disarming. "So you're saying you were a perfect child?" he teased. I was practically an angel, ask my auntie, she said, swaying playfully in her seat. Nathaniel chuckled, taking her hand and pressing a kiss in the center of her palm. After breakfast, Arya stood and excused herself. "Give me a few minutes to get ready, then we can head to the hospital," she said. "Yes, boss," the doctors around the table replied, causing Andrew to laugh. Arya grinned, hurried out and went upstairs. She first checked on the triplets, who were being watched by 4 Hawthorne staff as they napped. Then, she quickly returned to the suite she shared with Nathaniel and hurried to take a shower. Downstairs, Andrew pulled the Hawthorne guards aside, letting them know he needed to visit Anita's uncle and his wife, so Jake, Charles, Adam, Anton, Will, Adam, Stephen, Ash, Lewis, and the other top Hawthorne guards would need to take charge. "I'll go with Dr. Hawthorne to the hospital along with the ladies," Aidan volunteered. "I'll go with you," Adam said. "Me too," Lewis added. "Jake," Andrew called, subtly inquiring about his plans. "If the boss is going with Dr. Hawthorne, I'll go with him. But if he stays back, I'll stay here with him and the kids," Jake replied. They continued discussing their assignments. Andrew noticed Ash was silent, but he didn't address it. A few minutes later, Andrew and Anita left the ranch, with Andrew driving one of the custom-made trucks. After about a 10-minute drive, they reached a paved road heading into town. Anita began telling him about her favorite spots and reminiscing about her past escapades. "Take a turn at the next road," Anita directed. "Noted, dear," Andrew replied. His eyes flickered to the rearview mirror, and he saw they were being followed by a Chevrolet Silverado, the same brand of truck that Ash, Adam, and Lewis had encountered the day before. Andrew kept driving, trying to see if the truck would race past them as he reduced speed, but it didn't. So, instead of turning where Anita had asked him to, he continued on. "Andrew, you've missed the turn," Anita said, clearly dismayed. Andrew nodded. "Hold on a sec," he said, then glanced again at the rearview mirror. The truck continued, trailing them. Just as the trucks picked up speed, possibly to flank them, Andrew noticed another Hawthorne vehicle behind him. It was close enough for him to see who was behind the wheel. It was Ash. Andrew grinned. Andrew thought he should have known Ash would plan something like this. After all, Ash had warned them about Doug and Todd, and Andrew realized he should have taken those warnings more seriously, especially after hearing Justin's account of the men and knowing they weren't acting alone. Then there was the attack at Ravenwood Junction. He should have anticipated that their victories would have consequences. The men who fell might have been faceless strangers to them, but to their criminal group, it was undoubtedly a different matter entirely. But then, sometimes, having the Hawthorne guards at his beck and call made Andrew a bit complacent. Combined with his own skills, it was easy to fall into the trap of thinking himself invincible. If he were alone, it might not have bothered him as much. But he wasn't alone. He was with his pregnant fiancée. That, in its own way, made him far more vulnerable. He was grateful for Ash. Whether Ash had taken the initiative on his own, or Jake had remembered that Andrew planned to go unprotected with Anita and sent Ash after them, Andrew couldn't tell. Either way, he was thankful. "So I need to make a U-turn, huh?" Andrew asked in a calm tone as he threw her a sheepish smile. "Yes, baby, it's okay. Even the Great MacLeod is allowed a directional mishap," Anita teased, making him chuckle. "Got it," Andrew replied. When Anita made to turn around to scan the vicinity, Andrew reached out, draping an arm over her shoulders and pulling her in for a quick kiss, which made her smile blissfully at him. Meanwhile, he noticed Ash had positioned himself between his truck and the Chevrolet Silverado that was trailing them. Andrew made an effort not to look directly in Ash's direction so as not to alert Anita as he completed the U-turn. From the corner of his eye, he could see that Ash's massive truck had flanked the Chevrolet Silverado toward the wooded side. Ash had stopped and was stepping out to approach the Silverado. Andrew didn't want to leave Ash there alone, knowing they couldn't be sure if the man or men inside the Silverado had backup nearby. After moving a considerable distance away, he slowed the Jeep and then stopped. When Anita gave him a questioning gaze, he held up a hand. "Give me a sec. I just want to quickly send a message to Ash," Andrew said to Anita, who was also trying to contact her uncle to let him know they were close. "All right, baby," she replied absent-mindedly, returning her attention to her phone. Andrew took out his phone, pretending to type, but he was actually watching the side mirror to keep an eye on Ash. Ash, on the other hand, wasn't sure if Andrew fully understood how dangerous Doug was. The other one, Todd, was just a puppet. Without Doug, Todd was a harmless wannabe. But Doug looked like someone who enjoyed being a terror to others. It bothered Ash that Andrew thought it was a good idea to go off alone to see the Reynolds at a time like this. Not only could it be dangerous for Andrew and Miss Anita, but it could also draw unwanted attention to the Reynolds, which wouldn't be good for them. Earlier, as Andrew and Anita left the ranch and the others scattered to take up their assignments, Ash had been conflicted about which team to join. He'd been worried Andrew was making a terrible decision. He'd stood there a moment too long, enough for Jake to notice. The older man had walked back toward him, made eye contact, and said, "Speak." "Andrew is going with Miss Anita without a single escort," Ash had said simply. That was all it took for Jake to understand. "Go on then, back him up, make sure he makes it back in one piece," Jake commanded, patting Ash on the chest. As Ash made to leave, Jake grabbed him by the forearm and said, "You stay safe yourself, you hear?" Ash had nodded with a semblance of a smile. Andrew and Jake were the only two who openly treated him like they cared. Charles, however, would slit anyone's throat for even daring to look at Ash cross-eyed, but he'd rather jump off a bridge than admit that he cared. Ash didn't mind, though. He knew they all cared about him. He was so sure of it, so secure in it, that he didn't need their affirmations. He just chalked it up to a man thing. Not that Ash knew much about what men ought to do or feel, but he was learning. He learned every day. and part of that learning told him that none of them could be allowed to get hurt. That's why he was hopping mad when he saw the familiar Chevrolet Silverado trailing Andrew and Miss Reynolds. Ash sped up when he noticed the Chevrolet Silverado trying to veer off from the back of Andrew's Jeep. From his vantage point, he could see two figures in the front seat of the Silverado. One of them was attempting to open the roof, a gun in hand. Ash accelerated, realizing they must be planning to flank Andrew and open fire. While he knew Andrew's Jeep was bulletproof, he was also aware that Miss Reynolds was pregnant, and only heaven knew how a pregnant woman might react to fear. With that thought in his head, he floored the accelerator, determined to block the Silverado's move. He maneuvered to Andrew's side as Andrew increased his speed, creating space between the two vehicles. Taking advantage of the other men's momentary surprise, Ash swerved his truck in front of the Silverado, forcing it to a stop. As Andrew made a U-turn ahead, Ash reversed to block the Silverado from moving backward. Then Ash rammed his truck into the Silverado's side, forcing it off the road and into the woods, where it crashed against thick, sturdy branches. Watching the men inside the truck, he saw them trying to regain their balance and prepare to shoot at him. Acting quickly, Ash backed up before slamming into the Silverado again. Seeing how desperate the men had become, Ash lowered the passenger side window and drew out a Magnum fitted with a silencer. Taking careful aim, he shot through the Silverado's side window, hitting both men before they could pull their triggers. Satisfied that the threat was neutralized, Ash stepped out of his vehicle and strode toward the Silverado, wanting to confirm the men were dead. He wondered just how many men Doug had at his disposal, and if Doug even realized or cared who he was messing with. Perhaps Doug didn't care enough to warn the fools he kept sending to die in his stead. Peering into the Silverado, Ash reached out to check for a pulse. Suddenly, one of the men moved, startling him. Reacting instinctively, Ash buried a knife in the man's chest, watching as he choked on his own blood. Ash cursed under his breath, his heart racing. Pulling the knife out, he glared at the man before shooting him and his companion again, ensuring they wouldn't pose any further threat. As he walked back to his Jeep, Ash noticed Andrew hadn't left. Instead, he was parked a distance away, watching him. Once inside his Jeep, Ash locked the doors and pulled out his phone to send a message to the older man, but he saw that Andrew had beaten him to it. Andrew had sent a message simply saying, "Thank you." Glancing through his side mirror, Ash saw Andrew's Jeep start to move. Andrew returned to the turn Anita had indicated earlier and made his way onto the stone-paved road. She carried on chatting away, oblivious to the attack Ash had just averted. As Andrew continued along the lonely, hilly road, he kept darting his eyes to the rearview mirror, now on high alert for any potential ambush, all the while expertly carrying on the conversation with Anita. He was never one to talk much, and Anita's chatty nature balanced him well. His few monotone responses didn't alert her to his divided attention, as she must have been used to him being quiet and observant. Soon enough, they had the house in sight. "There it is!" Anita clapped with excitement, then threw Andrew a sidelong glance. Luckily, he was able to turn his head at that very moment, smiling at her. She leaned in and pressed a quick kiss to his lips. He thought she was the best. "Now remember what I tell you. Just be yourself. Ain't nobody care about if you're black, mixed, or even alien. You get me?" she lectured. Andrew nodded and grinned. Directing his attention back to the short drive ahead, he took the time to take in the cozy wooden cabin nestled in a snowy plain ahead. The cabin had a rustic design, constructed from logs with large windows. The roof was half covered in a thick layer of snow and framed by tall evergreen trees, their branches also dusted with snow. On the horizon behind the house, there were rugged, snow-covered mountains, which from their vantage point provided the house with a dramatic backdrop, quite picturesque, especially with the scattered clouds looming over it, under the bright snowy sky. Andrew couldn't help but glance in Anita's direction, wondering if she ever missed it, if she ever missed living in such a beautiful, almost perfect ambience. "Do you miss it? All of this?" he asked, his voice low and deep. Anita gave him a wistful smile. "I don't know if this sounds strange, but I haven't had time to miss it since we boarded the plane to New York. Andrew chuckled and nodded in understanding. Then her tone turned more serious. Sure, it's beautiful here, but it's got its downsides too, and trust me, you'll see it soon enough. I've learned that people make a home. Ever since we got to the Hawthorne estate, me, Aria, the twins, and Aunt Helena, we've been surrounded by so much love. I doubt any of us even remember to miss this place. Andrew nodded. I know exactly what you mean. I call it the Hawthorne touch. They've changed our lives, and now we wouldn't ask for anything more, he said, then leaned in and kissed her lips. I'm so happy you made the decision to follow Dr. Hawthorne to New York. Imagine I'd just be meeting you on this trip, he quipped, his eyes dimmed with glee. Really? You're so sure about me being yours either way? Anita teased, giving him playful kisses. Well, I'm the only big guy with enough heart to deal with your curves, didn't you say? He quipped. Anita gasped, then burst into laughter. Oh, where did you hear that from? She asked in mock horror. You forgot that in almost every room on the Hawthorne estate, there's always a Hawthorne guard, he replied with a wink. I need names, Anita said with comical menace. I'm going to crush their souls, she added in a growl, making Andrew laugh. Then a knock on the side window alerted them to their surroundings. An average-height man with pure white-grey hair and sun-kissed skin waved awkwardly at them. Andrew rolled down the side window and said, It's great to finally meet you, Mr. Reynolds, while Anita squealed, Uncle Tyrese! Andrew and Anita got out, and the two spent several minutes exchanging pleasantries. As they made their way up the wooden porch to the front door, Andrew looked over his shoulder and could make out a Jeep parked on the side of the road. Since he had chosen and recommended the custom-made Jeep Grand Cherokee Trackhawk, he could easily tell it was Ash, still waiting around and keeping an eye out for him. Nathaniel went looking for Aria in their room, wondering if she needed him to accompany her to the hospital for the surgery. He assumed she might prefer Ethan to be there just in case, and figured they couldn't let Ethan go alone. This meant he might have to follow her, even though he had been thinking about starting preparations for the bachelorette party Aria was supposed to host. A faint smile crept across his face as he considered his plan to duplicate the male strippers the ladies intended to hire. With the Blackwoods and the Doug and Todd idiots, he already had a built-in excuse for his duplicity. However, the idea of dancing in front of the ladies felt humiliating, and he began mulling over ways to avoid it. Perhaps they could set up a makeshift event tent, partitioned, so each woman could have a private dance with her designated stripper. At the start of the dance, though, he thought it might be fun to let all the women see all the men before the partitions were put in place. A devilish smirk stretched across his lips as the idea took root. Nathaniel started to consider how feasible it would be, brainstorming what resources and people they would need to make it happen. He also entertained the idea of setting up massage tables in each partition space, offering the ladies a spa treatment alongside the dances. He chuckled at the thought, acknowledging that noise filters would likely be necessary to muffle the chaos that was sure to erupt in each partition. Rubbing his hands together, he relished the devilish plan taking shape in his mind. As his thoughts shifted, he remembered the suggestion of a carnival for PR purposes. He decided they should let Justin handle the planning and show up with their people and security. As far as Nathaniel was concerned, the carnival wasn't a priority. But he thought the children would enjoy it, especially with Liam already planning to invite a few of his old school friends. There was something about Liam's request, though, that warned him. It felt like the little imp was up to something. He chuckled to himself at the thought. He figured as long as it was harmless fun, it would be fine. But knowing Liam, he decided he'd better tell Jake to keep an eye on him. Entering the room, Nathaniel's eyes immediately found Aria's silhouette in the shower stall. Closing the door behind him, he locked it and began unbuttoning his shirt as he walked toward her with measured strides. Despite having borne 5 children for him, she still looked the same, except for the telltale marks on her stomach, the cesarean section scar across her lower belly, and the other marks that told the story of her sacrifices. Each time he saw them, he was reminded of what she went through, reliving the memories of how she risked her life to bring their children into the world. It softened his heart further, making him fall in love with her all over again. She could ask him for the world, and he would give it to her for her bravery and love, for the extent to which she had risked everything for their family. With the thought lingering in his mind, Nathaniel slid open the glass door of the shower stall and watched as Arya smiled at him over her shoulder. "Your trust level is deep. You just automatically expect it to be me, huh?" Nathaniel teased. Arya giggled as he wrapped his arms around her from behind. "You're the only one I know who would dare," she quipped. Nathaniel's hand moved to her throat, cupping it gently as he pressed his face into the corner of her neck. He placed a kiss at the base of her neck, where her pulse throbbed, and felt her take in a sharp breath. "You're right, I'm the only one who would dare," he whispered against her skin. Then he took her earlobe into his mouth, his teeth grazing it lightly as he suckled, his other hand caressing her full chest. Arya's lips parted, her eyes closing as she submitted to his embrace. "I came here to ask a question," Nathaniel said, his voice low. Arya responded, her tone a mix of curiosity and distraction, though it was clear her mind was far from focused on his words. The sensations Nathaniel was kindling within her left no room for coherent thought. "Do you need me to come with you to the hospital?" he rasped, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'll always need you, baby," she moaned softly. "Focus," Nathaniel chided with a playful bite, making her tremble as she tilted her neck to receive his kiss. "Hospital," he repeated firmly. Arya giggled. "I heard you the first time, baby," she said, turning in his arms and wrapping hers around his neck. Nathaniel lifted her, kneading her thigh as it wrapped around his waist. Arya pulled him closer, her lips finding his and prying them apart, her tongue delving between them. "Ethan needs to be there," she whispered between kisses. "And I want Evangeline and Claire to take the triplets for their first checkup." "All right then," Nathaniel replied, thinking he could still work on his plans while waiting for her and the kids. Arya nipped at his lower lip, making his body jerk in response, his breathing growing heavier. He returned her fervent kiss, claiming her body and soul once more. "Nathan!" Arya moaned loudly. Nathaniel briefly imagined her making that same noise in his event tent, and a grin stretched across his lips again. "Yes, baby," he rasped, his voice thick with desire. "Don't stop," she whispered in a low, fervent tone. "I wasn't planning to," he whispered back, his gruff tone laced with dark intensity. He guided her under the shower, pressing her gently against the wall. Holding her wrists above her head, he buried his face against her chest to take her in his mouth as his other hand cradled her bum. He pressed hard against him. Arya screamed his name as her body was overtaken by violent tremors of pleasure. She understood then what he had meant when he said she had brought him back to his old self. Her entire body felt like rubber as waves of passion raked through her. She whispered, begged, and cried, but he didn't stop. When he was done with her, Arya felt limp in his arms, her body utterly spent. Nathaniel cradled her delicate form, their breathing mingling as the water cascaded around them. Oh shit, Arya thought, the memory of Nathaniel unleashing his feral passion on her flooding her mind. She gently cupped his jaw and pressed feathery kisses to his lips. Tears streamed down her face, overwhelmed by the sheer force of the emotions he stirred in her. "I love you," he whispered, his voice deep and rough. Arya couldn't find her voice to respond out loud, but she spoke it silently in her mind. All she wanted was for him to hold her and never let go. "My Ariana," Nathaniel murmured with feelings, gently peppering kisses all over her face. More tears streamed down Arya's face, her heart full. A short while later, they both got dressed, with Arya gazing up at Nathaniel as if seeing him for the first time. Nathaniel basked in the glow of her love, the warmth of it radiating through him and making him feel at peace. Before heading out, Nathaniel pressed another kiss to her lips, smirking when Arya let out a shaky breath, her eyes fluttering closed. It felt so good to know she loved and desired him just as much as he did her. They went to help the triplets get dressed, while one of the maids fetched Liam and Owen to change their clothes. Shortly after, they all headed out of the ranch, accompanied by Dr. Rowan, Dr. Williams, Dr. Sterling, Dr. Hart, Dr. Yen, Dr. Juliet Bennett, and Dr. Cassandra Fields. Jake, Charles, Lewis, Adam, Will, and Anton joined the group, while Stephen stayed back with a few other guards to secure the ranch and remain on standby in case of any need for backup. Charles drove the Jeep carrying the Hawthornes Ethan, Isla, Alex, and Anna, while Jake drove the Jeep carrying Evangeline, Claire, Yen, Dawn, Rowan, Miss Everly, and Dr. Williams. Justin, accompanied by 2 Hawthorne security personnel, headed to the county police department with Tristan to see Pamela. Upon reaching the hospital, Nathaniel noticed something different. Aside from the hospital guards, a few of his men were scattered around. Judging by how they were blending into the surroundings, Nathaniel guessed something was going on. He wondered if the Blackwoods had managed to get bail so quickly. Aria, on the other hand, noticed the tall, conspicuous men around the hospital, but she didn't recognize them as part of the Hawthorne guards, since they weren't in uniform. They weren't wearing their usual black, double-breasted suits with white inner shirts and black ties, so she assumed they were new additions to the Sylvan Ridge community. She did, however, recognize Sheriff Logan, who was sitting in a corner seat in the reception area. He stood up upon seeing them. Unconsciously, Aria darted her gaze toward her aunt, who hadn't noticed the sheriff yet. Aria's eyes shifted between the sheriff and her aunt, and she could see the sheriff watching her. Aria looked at Nathaniel, who also hadn't seen the man yet. Nathaniel appeared deep in thought, his brows furrowed in concentration. Aria nudged him in the side, making him lower his gaze to hers. She subtly gestured with her head toward Sheriff Logan and her aunt. Nathaniel tried to hide a smile at Aria's not-so-subtle excitement. He saw the moment Ms. Everly noticed the sheriff. She paused in her stride and smiled. Nathaniel didn't take his eyes off her until she looked his way. He raised an eyebrow and she rolled her eyes, giving him a dismissive wave of her hand. Nathaniel responded with the "I've got my eyes on you" gesture, making both Miss Everly and Aria giggle. "Good morning, Mr. Hawthorne. Blackwood. Aria," the older man greeted, then paused as his eyes settled on Miss Everly. "Helena," he added, his voice a bit low and gruff. "Hello, Patrick," Miss Everly greeted in return. Dr. Williams moved to stand beside her and offered the sheriff a handshake. "It's good to meet the man in charge. I'm Dr. Williams, Mr. Hawthorne's family doctor," he introduced himself. The sheriff accepted Dr. Williams's handshake hesitantly. Nathaniel and Ethan didn't miss the frown on the sheriff's face. Nathaniel figured the older man thought Dr. Williams was laying claim to Miss Everly. He quietly cleared his throat to suppress a laugh as Ethan grinned widely at him. Nathaniel thought this whole trip to Sylvan Ridge was going to be quite entertaining after all. "Thank you, Dr. Williams," the sheriff replied in a calm, professional tone. Aria introduced the rest of the group to the sheriff, then added, "Why are you here so early, Sheriff Logan?" Nathaniel noticed the sheriff's eyes shift and settled on Jake and Charles, who moved forward to flank Nathaniel, preparing to face the man. "Just providing security as requested," the sheriff replied with a warm smile. "Why do we need security here?" Aria asked with bemusement. The sheriff directed his gaze toward Jake and Charles again. "Precaution, Dr. Hawthorne. In case we have any problems like yesterday," Jake explained. Aria slowly nodded in understanding, but she thought the Doug character would be pretty dumb to cause trouble in a hospital in broad daylight. "All right, thank you, Sheriff," Aria said. Then, looking back at her group, added, "Let's get to work." Once everyone moved to follow Aria, Nathaniel stayed back with Jake and the rest of the Hawthorne guards. Once the others were at a considerable distance, Nathaniel asked, "Why don't you tell me the real reason you're here, Sheriff Logan?" Sheriff Logan sighed, shifting his gaze between Nathaniel, Jake, Charles, Ethan, and Aiden. In a low voice, he said, "Mabel, Miss White called me earlier. Even though Doug has been treated and discharged, he's refusing to leave the hospital, using Todd as an excuse to stay." Nathaniel's eyes narrowed, anger simmering at the news. "Refusing to leave? You mean that idiot is here?" He snapped, his teeth clenched. The extra guards he'd noticed earlier suddenly made sense. "Yes, Mr. Hawthorne," Sheriff Logan confirmed. "Not only is he refusing to leave, but he's also paranoid and has been threatening the doctors. That's why Mabel reached out, to keep the situation from escalating. I've spoken to Doug and we've come to an agreement. He'll leave once Todd wakes up, and in the meantime, he's not going to cause any trouble." "And you really think he's not just stalling to get access to Dr. Juliet Bennett?" Aiden asked, his tone laced with skepticism. "That's possible," Sheriff Logan admitted. "But my priority is avoiding escalation. Until he breaks our agreement, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, he clarified. You're making a mistake, Lewis said bluntly. Sheriff Logan turned toward him, his face shadowed with concern. I hope not, he replied. Sheriff, Nathaniel called, pulling his focus back. When their eyes met, Nathaniel continued, You look like you need a break and clearly understaffed. Why not let my men step in? Take a break. I promise they'll keep things under control for as long as necessary. The sheriff hesitated, visibly torn. Nathaniel could tell the older man's priority was peace, but he was clearly stretched thin. Ethan noticed the pause too. How's Mrs. Logan, Sheriff? Ethan asked softly, stepping forward. The question seemed to catch Sheriff Logan off guard, as though it had been a long time since anyone had brought her up. She passed away, Ethan. A mountain accident about 2 years ago, he said quietly, his tone heavy with restrained grief. Ethan frowned, regret flickering across his face. I'm sorry, I didn't know, he said earnestly. It's all right. It was a private affair, Logan responded. Ethan stepped closer. Come with me, Sheriff. I know a place where you can sit and take a moment. Logan exhaled deeply, understanding the underlying message. It was time to accept the help being offered. One of the Hawthorne guards followed Ethan and Sheriff Logan as they walked away. Nathaniel glanced sideways at Jake and Charles and asked, I take it you are aware those misfits were getting treatment here? Jake nodded. Charles replied, We've got it covered, boss. Nathaniel nodded in acknowledgement, right before Jake announced, Let's get to work, boys. Adam, Will, Lewis, and 5 other Hawthorne guards dispersed, leaving Jake, Aidan, and Charles behind with Nathaniel and Alex. The 5 of them made their way towards the hallway Aria and the other ladies, along with Rowan and Williams, had passed through earlier. I trust Andrew and Anita are on surveillance, Nathaniel asked, knowing they couldn't afford to lower their guard. Ash has them covered, Jake replied without hesitation. Good, Nathaniel said with a nod. Meanwhile, in Ian Blackwood's hospital room, Aria was reviewing his detailed test results, carefully going through each report line by line before passing the documents to Rowan, who handed them to Williams. Williams then passed them to Yen, who shared them with Dr. Sterling and Evangeline. The blood work, imaging scans, biopsy reports, and consultation notes were examined by all, gradually forming a clear picture of Ian's condition. Aria paused at the most recent CT scan, her finger tracing the highlighted area on the image. The tumor was located in the head of the pancreas, pressing against the superior mesenteric vein but not invading it completely. She flipped to another report and confirmed the absence of distant metastasis, which indicated the cancer had not spread to nearby major blood vessels. When she looked up, her relief evident, Rowan chuckled and nodded. Surgery is possible, he said. Then we follow up with chemotherapy or radiation therapy to shrink the tumor and reduce the risk of complications, he added, speaking out Aria's thought. It's borderline resectable pancreatic cancer, Dr. Fields said, almost to herself, with a nod of agreement. Will you be needing me, Dr. Hawthorne, or should I go for ward rounds? Dr. Juliet Bennett inquired, noting that now, with the Ian Blackwood case manageable by the medical powerhouse standing around the room, she could resume her regular duties. Dr. Hart and Dr. Sterling need to help with my children's checkups, so I'd like Dr. Fields to assist here and familiarize them with the hospital, Aria replied. Okay, boss, Juliet replied, standing by. Dr. Fields. Please, Dr. Yen and Dr. Williams will go with you for ward rounds, Aria directed. Rowan, Dr. Bennett and I will handle this surgery. When Anita arrives, she'll join you, Claire. Yes, boss, Dr. Sterling responded. Got it, boss, Dr. Fields replied, gathering her group and heading to the exit door. Turning to Juliet, Aria said, All right, Dr. Bennett, show us how you prep for surgery here. Juliet's hands trembled slightly, and it took her a moment to respond with a nod before gearing into action. Rowan noticed the subtle shake and stepped closer to whisper, Relax. Like Nathaniel Hawthorne always says, we're all family here. Juliet's lips curved into a small, grateful smile before continuing with her task. Rowan, can you get Ethan to come here? I want him to talk to Ian before we start surgery. We're going to wake Ian up, Aria instructed. Rowan nodded. On it, he replied, leaving to carry out her request. Evangeline followed Claire, Yen, and Dr. Cassandra Fields out into the hallway to join Noria, Dawn, and Isla, who were carrying the triplets and sitting with Anna, Miss Everly, Liam, and Owen. She held out her hands to Liam and Owen, who immediately took them while glancing back to make sure everyone who was carrying their baby siblings was following along with their big mama. Where are we going, Aunt Eva? Liam asked, as Dr. Cassandra Fields continued to lead them down the hallway. We're going to my favorite place in the hospital, Evangeline replied with a smile. Can you guess? You have a favorite place in a hospital? Owen asked, tilting his head with a deadpan expression. Evangeline held back a laugh. She probably means where the babies are, Owen, Liam said, frowning as though he couldn't believe his very smart brother hadn't figured that out immediately. Oh, Owen responded with a nod. You had me worried there for a minute, Aunt Eva, he added. Evangeline chuckled, feeling glad that the twins had moved from calling her Dr. Hart to Aunt Eva. She could almost feel springs in her steps. It was important to her that she gained acceptance from Jake's family, and she knew how much he loved the twins. Here we are, Dr. Fields said as she strode through double doors, revealing a vibrant, child-friendly room. The color scheme of the room featured a calming mix of pastel greens and blues, creating a welcoming and cheerful atmosphere. In one corner was a reception desk with a modern curved design, accented by a soft, textured panel. Directly opposite was a seating area, where round ottomans and chairs in green, grey and blue tones were arranged in a cozy, playful layout. The flooring featured a unique pebble pattern design, adding a natural touch to the decor. Child-friendly artwork like pictures of apples adorned the walls, and the room was brightly lit by natural light streaming through a large window. A small play area with a table and chairs was set up in the left corner of the room, featuring entertainment for young patients. Liam and Owen left Evangeline's side to explore the entertainment corner, but when Dr. Fields proceeded into the inner office, Liam and Owen followed her and Evangeline, even though Miss Everly, Noria, Dawn and Anna had settled down in the comfortable seating area with Landon, Mason and Esme. Inside the office, a lady stood up from a small desk in the corner. Evangeline thought she looked poised and elegant. Her hair, a warm ginger blonde, was neatly swept back into an updo that framed her face and accentuated her features. Her skin appeared smooth and radiant, highlighted by subtle, expertly applied makeup that emphasized her natural beauty. Her eyes were captivating, with a steady gaze that conveyed both confidence and curiosity. The faint shimmer of her neutral-toned lipstick added a touch of softness to her overall expression, which rested somewhere between a polite smile and thoughtful engagement. She wore a white, sleeveless outfit, drawing attention to her well-defined jawline and the graceful contour of her neck, as well as her slim forearms. "Good morning, Dr. Fields," the lady said, her eyes briefly shifting from Evangeline to Liam and Owen. Her smile grew as her gaze settled on the Hawthorne twins. "Good morning, Grace," Cassandra responded with a warm smile before turning to Evangeline to make the introduction. "Dr. Hart, please meet Grace Hamilton, our very skilled pediatric nurse. And Grace, please meet Dr. Evangeline Hart, a pediatrician from Evergreen Memorial Hospital." At the mention of the well-known hospital, Grace Hamilton straightened, and her gaze grew sharper as she said, "Oh, you work with the boss?" Evangeline wasn't sure how to respond to that. She had worked with and for Dr. Hawthorne, but not at Evergreen Memorial. "Nice to meet you, Miss Hamilton," she said simply. "Oh no, just Grace. Grace will do just fine, Dr. Hart," she quickly responded. "All right, so these gentlemen are the boss's sons, Liam and Owen. I hope I got that right," Cassandra said, glancing between Liam and Owen. "Well, you played it safe and didn't identify who was who, so I guess you did good," Owen said matter-of-factly, making Grace and Cassandra exchange an amused glance. "You have a nice place here, Miss Grace," Liam said, then added, "Do you have a boyfriend?" Evangeline pressed a hand to her mouth to stifle a laugh. Cassandra beamed, and Grace gave Liam a warm, pandering smile before leaning over and saying, "Why, no, sir, and may I ask why you want to know?" she said in a low, playful tone. "Well, obviously I'm too young to date, so you must know I'm asking for my uncles," Liam replied matter-of-factly. Before Liam could say more, Owen clamped a hand over his mouth and, with an embarrassed laugh, said through gritted teeth, "Please, let's get to why we're here." Cassandra and Grace giggled. "Are they always like this? My God, they're so cute," Grace whispered to Evangeline. According to their very beloved Uncle Jake, Owen is the only one allowed to be called cute, and Liam is the evil genius, she quipped with mock seriousness, making the ladies laugh. Ushering the boys outside to the reception area, Evangeline introduced Miss Anna Morris, Dawn Hill, Miss Isla Devereaux, Miss Everly, Noria, and the triplets. Shortly after, Evangeline clapped her hands together and said, "Let's get to work." When Big Mama handed Esme over to Dr. Hart and pulled Liam close to help him change into a hospital robe, Liam looked from his Aunt Evangeline to Dr. Fields and the pediatric nurse Grace Hamilton. He then asked, "What's going on?" He wasn't sure he liked the idea of getting naked in front of girls. "A checkup, dear," Miss Everly responded. "You, Liam, and the triplets are getting checkups," she explained. Liam and Owen exchanged a panicked glance. "So, we have to take off our clothes?" Owen asked hesitantly. "Uh-huh," their Big Mama responded. Liam and Owen exchanged another glance, and then, as if on cue, they backed away and ran for the door. "Boys, come on!" Anna called after them. "Really?" their Big Mama exclaimed in surprise. "Liam! Owen! Come back!" Aunt Noria called after them. "You'll not catch us alive!" Liam said dramatically, bolting down the hallway. Noria burst out laughing, and the other ladies joined in. So then while Evangeline and Grace got to work, assisted by Miss Everly, Noria, and Isla, Anna went after Liam and Owen.